My father told me when I was a child, people in authority lie.
It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Monday, November 3rd, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. Definitely an important kind of general view today. I put off a lot of foreign policy conversation today to sort of focus on some of the more nuanced points that I definitely think are important with sort of my new, what I was kind of like piecing through the last week of trying to figure out how to maneuver through what's important and what's not when it comes to just, the whole flood the zone tactic, whether it's left or right or just the government trying to overwhelm people with information, which we all know is a major part of how this is done today. The idea of, whether they're lying in certain circumstances and whether that's important for you to see, or maybe you didn't see that, which is why it's important for me to make sure people know that they're lying. But a few important stories today, like what I think is pretty obviously a not new story for the FBI to fake an event, or rather be a part of it, have something ultimately not necessarily happen, but it was about to happen. There was things that were planned. And then it turns out that they were involved with the planning and were the ones that were proposing the idea. And then when nothing ultimately happens, what do you take that story as? So are you to take the word of the government that the people that didn't do anything yet were always going to, even though the plan was put together by the FBI? Now, this is a very old story. This has been going on since the FBI has been put together. And there's been a lot of very important examples that we'll go over today, at least some of the ones that that I've covered in the past, the ones that I think are the most relevant. There's quite a few of them. The New York Times has covered this. The Intercept has covered it many times. TLAV many times. How the FBI will manufacture events in order to stop them. Now, some people may not even feel that's wrong because they think they trust the people to tell you who they think are the bad guys and will try to coerce them into the crime. But even if they are bad guys, whatever that means to the subjective person out there watching this, if there's no crime committed, how can we possibly call it a crime? This is where we get into the whole pre-crime idea, or even like the rights overlap of saying, I say something and that causes somebody to take an action, and then arguing in some way, no matter what the context is, that I'm responsible for that outcome. I'm of the mind, and I don't know how we even got here, that there's no way to argue otherwise. Fire in a theater, look, if we as a society, not the government, but society, want to come to the conclusion that the shall not be infringed inherent absolute rights that are outlined in the Constitution for human beings in the world, whether or not we can enforce that, and argue that that's somehow archaic, that it doesn't matter as much anymore, maybe we need to get to a new place where we define things differently, then let's have that conversation. I've said that so many times. The problem is people are arguing they're defending for the Constitution, but in reality, they want something different, or at least they're using the narrative to get to a different place. But the truth is, everything's kind of coming down around us right now. And I'm going to start with a point that I wanted to kind of make me keep you thinking about around Trump, around the government in general. The incremental moves, kind of what I was getting at there, the slow boil, the reality of driving us into a position where the government's always wanted us, but hasn't been able to get you there, whether technologically, whether with your rights. And today we seem to be dangerously sliding in that direction. So thinking about Donald Trump, and today we're going to talk about more than the false flag point. We're going to talk about FBI, ICE. We're going to start with some follow-ups, but a lot of just dishonesty. The other main story, by the way, the two of the main stories is the reality, not new. We've been talking about it, but a really obvious point of drones and tech in Israel coming home to surveil U.S. cities. With everything else we've talked about, it becomes very more than alarming. But today, thinking about Trump, and I don't want this to be taken as Trump versus Biden or left versus right, because if you watch this show, you know I don't feel that way. I think our government, the power structure that it is, use different people, different momentum to achieve the larger long-term goal. And whether that's about U.S. interest or something larger, you can decide that. But this point applies to anybody who's been a president, anybody who's continued the agenda. But just today, it's very, very important for people that somehow think that he is the one pushing back against that agenda, that he is the one that's fighting the deep state, whatever you think that means, fighting the power, pushing back against the long-term agenda, the World Economic Forum, vaccines, anything. So as well as the peace president, which we'll have a point, not today's show, we'll get to in a future, hopefully tomorrow in regard to more of the foreign policy stuff, but to make that point today in a broad sense, that he's not the peace president. Whether there's ever been a peace president, you can decide, but Donald Trump is not that, not in any context, not by metrics, not by basic observation. He's not the peace president. He's not fighting vaccines, right? I mean, can we all just acknowledge that? He's totally not fighting the vaccine at least not even close to the way that even his core followers, even Maha, had even slightly expected. The opposite direction. Self-amplifying shots, more COVID-19, in particular, mRNA shots for COVID-19, but on a Stargate platform, right? He's not fighting vaccines. He's not arresting Bill Gates. He's getting closer to Bill Gates, right? He's making more deals with him. He's not arresting any of the people we've talked about. He's not arresting Obama or any of the things they've put forward. That's not happening. Tomorrow, as of right now, it's not only not happening, it seems to be going in the other direction. Now, you may push back with Comey and Letitia. Well, we'll see how that plans out. If you actually care to look at the evidence and not the screaming people online, it very clearly seems to be going in the direction where nothing will happen at all. And even with the FBI point we'll talk about today, seems to be going in the same direction. He's not fighting globalism. I mean, how can we possibly argue otherwise when every single thing he's doing is in the interest of that larger idea, which is also nebulous. It's not globalist corporation. It's not just China. It's a larger idea of globalism, of one power, one, New World Order type of one world government idea. These are not old ideas. He's not fighting any of that. Every single thing he's doing is leading the direction of the building of that idea. He's not exposing the World Economic Forum. He's just not. He's in fact spoke at Davos in every possible way. He's aligning with those agendas. Whether or not you want to make it an obvious connection today where he's out there going, you'll own nothing and be happy, even though that's basically what's ultimately happening. He's not fighting that. He's not lowering spending. I'm sorry, despite all the lies, we'll touch on that today. Spending, maybe tomorrow it'll go down. Maybe at the end of the 4 years, he'll save the entire world. Right now, spending is up. It's just the reality for the vast majority of Americans. The facts are pretty clear. You can ask Rock. You can look at study. I mean, it's pretty obvious. He's not shrinking government, pretty obviously. Isn't it weird? I've brought this up many times. I was just talking about it yesterday. Doge is so fascinating to me because it's not like it just kind of, Elon stepped aside and it just sort of like it just vanished. No one's talking about it. No one's pointing to any kind of savings, even though we all know that's the opposite of the reality. It went shockingly far in the direction. And nobody goes, but hey, so they all lied the whole time. Not the left media, not all the, whatever you want to call the thing they claim is fighting Trump. None of them are doing that. They're all going right along with ignoring that it was even there to begin with. It's despite it being loaded. All of the massive claims of savings and crimes that were committed. And I'm not even disagreeing with most of that. The fact is they didn't do anything about it. It was about AI data scooping, using all of your data to train their AI models. It was about surveillance. It was a Palantir. I mean, we have to be real about that. But it's not lowering spending or shrinking the government. That's literally the opposite of what's happening. He's not lowering taxes. For you anyway, that's not happening. He's not lowering costs. Spending is, your general spending is not lower. Your costs are exponential. I shouldn't say exponentially. That's not the accurate term. It's not, but it is higher. Percentage-wise, very clearly based on anything you want to look at. He's not exposing Epstein. Now, these are just the points that I think are relevant right now, but we can go on forever, right? That's not happening. And despite what all the claims were, despite all the push, despite everything that we heard, he's not ending the IRS, not ending the Fed. Right? I mean, you could always brush these off, but all this together, at what point do we just go, so they just were gaslighting you? No different than Obama or Biden or Bush. It's the same kind of idea. He's not locking up the Democrats. Show me one Democrat who's going to prison. Not some random kid with pink hair that believes he's in the left, whatever the left-right partisan mindless followers are. The Democratic operative, the people involved in the government that they're claiming, like we'll talk about today, stole Social Security numbers or let the immigrants in. Yeah, probably. Arrest somebody. That's not happening. Not one. He's not upholding the Constitution. Now, do we even really need to debate that? So many people are pushing back. He's not upholding the most basic tenets of the Constitution. Now, you may argue that's because he has to break it to fight the Democrat. Okay, fine. I don't believe that's what's actually happening, but either way, then you're okay with breaking the reality. You have no principle because you don't break it to fight for it. It's not how that works. He's not saving Israel for last. He's just not. He's very much in every possible way you could ever imagine. More than anyone I've ever seen, including from Israel's perspective, including from U.S. government's perspective, the most pro-Israel, the most Zionist president in history. So, again, maybe tomorrow that'll all come tumbling down. I hope so. At the moment, let's be real about where we are. He's not making America great again. Now, you can want to believe that. I'd like to believe it too. Even if I don't believe he's the person that that you might think he is, I'd still praise every positive thing that came about for this country. The reality, sadly, as I'm sure you've already picked up on, the fact is that he's doing the opposite of literally every one of the things we just listed. And there's plenty more that we could get into. To me, that's pretty jarring to realize how obvious that is. And so we'll go over some of this. Is what I was saying earlier. For example, we'll talk early on about a point from Tricia McLaughlin in regard to ICE and just how many basic, blatant, asking Grok, how many times has she been caught verifiably lying? And it's just insane about ICE, about the different thing. We'll get into an example of a U.S. citizen that was just shot in the back. And they lie and say, oh, he was aggressive and trying to hit us. And the reality is, or appears to be at this moment, to be the exact opposite. And the point is, you can look at the endless amount of times that she's been caught lying, not just like kind of half-truth, like the blatant opposite of the reality that later is provably the case even in court. And nothing happens. Not to say that anyone's ever going to arrest a politician for lying. Weirdly enough, despite them trying to do that, it's just broken to where we are. It's just jarring to see how vividly dishonest it is, how completely broken it's not like in the past, it was some kind of like a partial misrepresentation. The left and the right and the screamers around both sides are just off the plot. They've lost the plot. They're off the path. And I think personally that comes to something much larger than just fighting for more power. We're watching something very dramatic happening right now, whether that is a transition of power within this country or something outside of it. I think it's pretty clear that we are watching something happen and Americans are just kind of standing by. And we should be doing something. The sad reality is far too many in the kind of 60% of Americans that realize the whole thing is broken and usually don't vote are, I guess, don't know where to go next. I get it. The truth is, though, that we need to stand up and at least be screaming at the top of our lungs that we all see what's happening. I believe that alone could make a lot of difference. But let's start today with one point that I want to read from High Impact Flicks. Same kind of idea about partisanship. And he makes a great point on this. He says, okay, I'm open to correction here, and I'm ready to be schooled. I just don't get it. Explain to me how anybody can possibly think that Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, Candace Owens, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, Bernie Sanders, Charlie Kirk, AOC, or any member of Congress or any popular podcaster that's been fomenting the left-right political divide for years is on your side. Now, I'll add that doesn't necessarily mean that maybe that they're all aware that they're, like the point being is that from our perspective, seeing beyond the left-right partisan divide, people who are promoting that, even if have good intentions, I argue will never truly succeed if their goal truly is to change that, because they are only seeing one part of the problem, half the problem, a fraction of the problem. So what he's saying is, I don't see how anybody can think any of these things are on your side. Now, I agree with that from the sense of the left-right paradigm, I think, is designed to keep you from ever truly solving what we're all starting to see, whether that's foreign influence or just the broken nature of our corrupt government. That is why that won't change. So it's not that you have to believe Tucker hates you and is lying to you every single day or any of the rest of them. It may very well be that they think they're doing the right thing. The point is that this is the block. How long have I been saying that? And that's my point. He continues, do each of them say good things at times? 100% they do. Yes, he says. Do they discuss interesting topics and have interesting guests with interesting conversations? Yes. But that's the art of deception. Again, in a general sense, like you don't have to believe you mean every one of them. The point is that does that happen? Yes. Now, if they are dishonest, then that would be very much how that usually works. The dishonest people don't come out waving a sign going, I'm going to lie to you today. They come across as the most, the Obama style, right? Very measured, very clean cut, very, very likable, very calm, and is one of the most dangerous people in the world, right? That's how that tends to work. Or alternatively, Donald Trump. They're somebody who connects with a very, very specific type of person. I don't mean in a negative way at all. Just that any one of these people, Obama, to connect with a very specific type of person. The point is that they tap into what they think is that momentum. And it's very, and that, I mean, I would add the one difference is that Trump does appear to be very, I would argue, easy to see being dishonest. But that's where I bring in that there's something else happening. That's my opinion, though. Overall, though, the point is clear that the best lies tend to be buried in truth. There's supposed to be some truth. He says it's supposed to be interesting and engaging, and the personality has to have some measure of charisma in order to attract a massive amount of people. He says, do you think Nick Fuentes or Stephen Miller or Alex Jones are good guys? What the heck? That's just his opinion, but I happen to agree. He says to actually believe they aren't part of the larger operation that continues to feed into the corrupt system that's owned and controlled by the money masters seems willfully ignorant at this point. I happen to agree. They want you supporting personalities who are clearly lying hypocrites. Controlled opposition is the thing, by supporting and defending these liars. Now, that's his opinion. I don't know if I feel that every one of them are willfully deceiving you in every possible way, but it says every time that by supporting and defending these liars, you demoralize yourself. Virtue fades and tyranny skates through the wasteland of your mind and ease, as they continue to set up their Palantir control grid unabated. For example, Candace Owens interviews someone like Tate at the exact same time, or period of time that Tucker does. And what do they both do? Give him a complete platform to state blatant lies that you can prove to this day were lies when he said them. That guy's an objectively bad person. Why do they do that? Now, that doesn't prove everything else they ever say is a lie, but there's something weird there that we have to acknowledge, or pulling punches for partisanship. Now, maybe both of them, Tucker and Candace, are suddenly seeing it all and calling everything out. I hope so. I'll continue to point out when they say something that's true. We should question them regardless, just like a politician. It's very simple. If you always do that, it really doesn't even come down to anymore whether or not they're lying or honest or having them. It's about the facts and whether you can prove it. And it's up to you to decide that. It's up to you to verify that, not because she said so or I said so or anybody else. The problem is that this has become a personality game. But it's worth thinking about that as we go through all this, because everyone seems so desperate to find a side, even amongst the people calling out the left-right paradigm. It's a trap. It's being designed just like for that very reason. Now, to talk about the peace president point, which will relate to pretty much the rest of what we're talking about today. But in regard to in-depth foreign policy, we'll get to Venezuela and Somalia and a few other things we're going to talk about in the next show. But if you didn't see this, I just had to make sure we included this. The idea of all that Donald Trump would, they must know that the public information that you can literally see is that al-Jawlani, right there, was part of Al-Qaeda. That's the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the group that they had been telling you were terrorists, the group that they had been using as the scapegoat to justify actions all over the world, in Syria predominantly. Al-Tanf and the whole conversation. This has been going on for a very long time. They had millions of dollar bounty on his head. And now Trump's shaking his hand? He realized that they took the bounty away the moment that Israel allowed them to take control of Syria. There's not even a moment where there was some kind of middle ground. He was a terrorist, and then he was the suit guy. That's why I use that picture today. Running Syria all of a sudden and allowing Israel to come in, and him telling him we won't do anything against Israel, allowing Israel to take over half of the territory, allowing them to bomb and kill things, allowing them to ethnically cleanse people everywhere. This is the guy Donald Trump is literally shaking hands with. As Daniel McAdams says, literal ISIS is joining the U.S. anti-ISIS coalition. U.S. foreign policy in a nutshell. Exactly. It's insanely stupid. We have gone so far away from even pretending. They're literally going, let's make look, this, to jump far ahead, this has always kind of been happening. We've seen U.S. politicians float even the idea of maybe we make a deal with Al-Qaeda. There's a reason that was being kind of clumsily put out there, because they've always, as I've been telling you my entire career, funded, armed, and worked with ISIS and Al-Qaeda. They're proxy elements of Israel, the United States, and plenty of other overlapping factors. It's not a secret. It is one of the easiest things to prove in this conversation. Sort of like the Al-Zav movement in Ukraine being the exact same thing. I'll grab James Corbett's our watch through around the documentary that's about this very point, in case you want to go deeper and have the receipts to just nail this to the wall. And you'll never again question whether or not Israel and the United States, at least in some points in the past, up until this very day, have been funding and working with the very groups they claim to be fighting all around the world. Hamas and Gaza being a perfect example of that. They use these things to manipulate you. Here's Donald Trump telling you he's, the peace president, saving the world, fighting evil, whatever narrative is out there. And this just makes that all ridiculous. Al-Shara set to become first ever president to visit the White House from Syria. President. Sprinter Press News. Thank you. It says, heading to Washington to meet Trump on November 10th. And this is the image somebody shared. You have a AI image of Trump and Bibi, giving him a little 1, 2, 3 in the barber chair, 2008, making, but the point being, creating their proxy terrorist element to use for foreign policy, and then transitioning him into the chair for his barbershop remake to have a suit on and become the guy they're using today. I mean, you must realize that they know you know this. They know we see this. This is what it's like everything else we're talking about right now, isn't it? It's like Gaza. They know you know what's happening. They know that we know. They know we're calling it out, and they just don't care. So either you being involved means nothing to them, other than some illusion of a process, or somebody else is completely making the decisions. Foreign power, whatever you think. There's just really no other way to understand this. They're doing things that are blatantly illegal. Now, to say whether or not other countries or other parts of the world are outraged or just using it to reposition themselves against the U.S., I mean, who knows how much is corrupt and how much is not, if any. The bottom line is, that's why many of us go back to government in essence being the problem, but feels like that's just never going to come around to being something people consider, but I'll keep bringing it up until it is. But as Jason Bassler points out, Trump wants to assist Israel. Trump wants to fix Venezuela. Those are in quotes. Trump wants to save Nigeria. Meanwhile, 36.8 million Americans live in poverty, 771,000 homeless Americans, $18.4 trillion in household debt. America First trademark was never the plan. It was a distraction. I 100% agree. Now, whether it was a distraction or just, either way, it's the same point. They're just using it to keep you gaslit, to keep you pacified. You are thinking we're safe, unless you just look. Just actually turn your head and go, oh my God, everything he's saying isn't actually happening. Pay attention. It's very clear. This is why I think most Americans, if we live in a world where not everybody's a complete blind partisan follower, and I have to believe that's the case, most of them are recognizing that he's not doing what he's saying, because he's not. It's very simple. And your groceries are up and your gas prices are, and everything says it's opposite. So people aren't going to be dishonest about that unless it's because they blindly want to follow Trump and nothing else matters. I just don't believe that's the majority of people. Now, Trump says there could be U.S. boots on the ground against airstrikes in Nigeria. There's no way you can look at this and go, oh, the peace president, right? It doesn't matter unless you think that making war because of your interest for U.S. government or rare earth minerals or for control are peace. There's no world in which this is anything other than imperialist control. This is about far more, and we'll get into this again in probably the next show, more so about Nigeria, more so about the Sudan, more so about Somalia, and all these different these parts that are playing a role in what's happening. Trump said on Sunday that there's a possibility that U.S. boots on the ground or airstrikes in Nigeria. The idea that he's even floating boots on the ground in Nigeria? To what end? To what legal reality? Is there ISIS there? Even then, that doesn't make it legal for them to invade a foreign country with no declaration of war, let alone for any reason outside of being attacked. This is not in line with our Constitution. It's not in line with international law. And it's sure as hell not what any American wants from him, even his base, other than the blind, screaming people that support him no matter what. That's the same kind of point, guys. That's a small fraction of the majority of people on his base who just want actually what he was promising. That's my opinion anyway. And it says, over the weekend, it says, could be, Trump told reporters, they're killing a record number of Christians in Nigeria. Okay, well, there's very clear things to be discussing there. And also very clear interest of outside powers that are playing a factor there. We'll get into that in the next show. The point, though, is not to get into the usual suspects being involved and why this might be happening for other rare earth minerals and control and geostrategic influence. The point is that why is this your American responsibility? Now, you may think, well, we have a moral responsibility. Hey, plenty would agree with you. That's exactly what the left was doing when the right was calling them warmongers. And Tulsi Gabbard said, we have to end it all, and Venezuela's bad. And now they're all like, yay, war because freedom. Yeah, because they're all the same thing if you're actually paying attention. Now, we'll come back to this. I certainly hope this doesn't happen, but I pretty sure it will, like in some form. That's why it's being floated. Oh, and another story. Breaking news, Washington denies covert military operations in Mexico under pretext of cartel war. Again, same point. Now, this is where we get into this alarming overlap of saying that they can basically kill anyone they want anywhere based on the argument that they're cartels, which we'll talk about in a second. But the idea here, so the cartel, who has overlapped with working with intelligence in the U.S. and Israel, by the way, for a long time. That's not just it's just funny because how often this becomes overlap because of the Israel-U.S. agendas being mashed together and basically everything today. Everyone always goes, oh, you just always bring them in. It's not, I'm not doing that. They are involved. Look it up. You can very easily see, and we've talked about in past shows. Now, I would have it usually to go along with it, but we're not making the larger point today. Again, the next show will be focusing more on some of these foreign policy points. This is to demonstrate the lack of a peace president. But the cartel idea, first of all, is based on something you can prove that they're hypocritical about, that they work with. On top of that, they're declaring a war on a general cartel idea, many of which are things they just kind of mash into it like in other contexts. But why is this what Americans would want? Oh, because fentanyl, except that's not even really where that comes from. The majority comes from the mail in China. We talked about this 100 times over. This is more than that. And we could be talking about the GMO push, what they're trying to do with Mexico. We could talk about control of some. I mean, there's 1,000 reasons this is important to the United States. And it's not about freedom, and it has nothing to do with drugs. But all that aside, which is the point of the segment, why is this what you support? Is this peace? Are we going to war with Mexico because you believe cartels are bad? Well, realize how completely disjointed this is from what everyone said was going to be happening. That's the only point for this. Now, whether you think we should be doing this or whether there's actually really a threat or whether they're actually at war with the cartels, we'll talk about that in the next show. But this is just more war under a justification, would operate under Title 50 authority, placing it under U.S. intelligence control rather than military. Yeah, welcome to the future, guys. We are in a place where this is probably Detachment 201 running our foreign policy. And I'm literally just pulling that out of nowhere, by the way. Oh, dang it. Hold on. What was it? There it is. Just since I mentioned it, I'll include it. I mean, I only said that to just make us connect your mind to some other aspect of it, but this is not normal time. This is, if you're talking about an intelligence-led war about, around the cartels and it happens to connect with what they're bombing in the waters they claim is Venezuela, that overlaps with international law dynamics and precedent and being able to kill whoever they want, which we'll talk about. Let's not forget, you've got Meta, Palantir, and what was it? What was it? Meta, Palantir, and was it OpenAI? Anyway, I think it was OpenAI at being sworn in as colonels in the military. That's literally technocracy in uniform. They didn't earn that. And they have complete command. They have command over anybody underneath them. It's not some, notary thing. So when you have them doing this, let's recognize where we're going with this. This is not normal, and it's going in a direction that is driving us into, globalist-led wars. That's what we're talking about. Now, John Pang writes, in regard to Sputnik, talking about Malaysia. Oh, I shall read this first, actually. He says, U.S. presses Malaysia, you probably have seen this, to ditch their bricks for Western supply chains. Well, this is the same thing we talk about. Now, this is a smaller version of this, but you know what Trump has done so far. In a very realistic way, he's allowed financial issues to turn into basically hot, potentially war situations, which is not new. Typically, economic warfare almost always ends up in some level of war. But the point is, here, he's threatening them to not do what's in their interest, right? Don't work with other countries we don't like. And you have to, you have to rely on us. Now, in many cases, like we saw with Russia and Syria at the time when it was the, now I'm blanking on the terms, the munitions they were using, right? It wasn't just Syria, but there's a lot of different points where they were saying or more in Europe, actually saying you have to buy from the US, even though they got far, far better and cheaper things from Russia. That's not in every circumstance, but that was the case at the point in the past. And yet they said, you have to buy from us because terrorism. Well, this is the choice of Malaysia or European countries. They can choose to deal with whoever they want. Why the U.S. government thinks they can decide, because that's what's been going on as far as I've ever been doing this. Left or right, they pressure them to do what's in their interest, and they act like that's somehow liberty and freedom and international law. It's just not. It's basic. They're muscling them to do what they want to benefit them at the cost of anybody else. And he says, it's very important to recognize where Malaysia's long-term prosperity comes from. This is a U.S. ambassador. He says, which in our view is from its deep integration in Western supply chains. And there's another clip if you want to watch down here. And John Pang, who is the ASEAN, Community of Common Destiny for Mankind. I'm familiar with him. He says, and I am sure we didn't know where our prosperity came from before we were told by the U.S. Just such always these pompous kind of entitlement, I guess. But he goes, and their Western supply chains? Point well taken. Not really when you break it down. I mean, Trump's definitely trying to at least says he's trying to create that dynamic, but it's just the idea that you're saying you need us. It's a threat. Let's make it simple. It's a threat. They're saying, stop working with BRICS countries, work with us, or we're going to make something. And how much you want to bet, they absolutely don't even hide that. But this is not about peace. It's happening everywhere. How about Somalia? As Caitlin Johnstone points out, what percentage of Americans do you think are aware that Trump has bombed Somalia nearly 100 times this year? Probably none. Would it even be 1%? Antiwar.com, U.S. bombed Somalia for 3 consecutive days. Why is that not covered even by the Democrats that supposedly hate Trump? In the media, anyway. Interesting point. Well, as Scott Horton writes, here's Dave DeCamp, who we just interviewed, by the way, hoping to work more with him. Good conversation we had about primarily the Venezuelan boats. But he says, good talking to these guys. They had a podcast about Somalia, and Scott Horton says America's longest war, just short of 25 years now. Remember that this is not new. And there's never been a declaration of war, and they're very much conducting war there for a long time now, left and right, pretty much as far back as you want to look. And of course, let's not forget the very clear reality that they have been involved for a very long time. This is from 2017. I believe it was antiwar.com at the time, and it says, what you aren't being told about the U.S.'s war in Somalia? It's just never stops how these things are much, I mean, over like even one, but 2 administrations, it seems like American people just forget everything from before. Yes, on Sunday, the U.S. military carried out, this back in 2017, airstrikes in Somalia against al-Qaeda-linked terror groups. Right. We just went over that. Long time this has been happening. I'll include this interview with Dave. And of course, here is Lindsey Graham. I just can't, but they just had this Republican Jewish coalition. There's another clip we'll play in a minute. Lindsey Graham tells Republican Jewish coalition not to worry about Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes. They really were like obsessively talking about him as weird. He goes, I feel about Republicans. I feel good about the Republican Party. I feel good about where we're going as a nation. We're killing all the right people and we're cutting your taxes. I mean, what are we talking about here? This is, and Dave, we're killing all the right people? Like, why don't we just play that really quickly? Like, I just think that needs to be heard. You know, the idea that this is a very prominent, kind of forever politician in our country, and he is telling you that we're killing all the right people. In what world does that make sense? Oh, looks like I already did have it. That's the wrong one. That's why. Here it is.
Recognize Jerusalem as capital of Israel. Why?
Oh, and it was illegal, by the way, but who cares, freedom.
Because if you got a problem with that, take it up with God. He's the guy that did it, not Trump.
What stupidity these people are. I mean, it's the same as Ted Cruz just going, well, it says Israel, and that's in the Bible, so you don't believe in Christianity or whatever stupid thing he said about that. It's a word, guys. Pretty sure when the Balfour Declaration from the UK government, from the British government, was written by Lord Rothschild, and they literally handed Palestinian land to Israel, pretty sure that had nothing to do with God. Pretty sure that was a business transaction between the Zionist organization and the group they were threatening with terrorism, the British government. I mean, it's just stupidly insane. It just blows me away that we can still, like, where are all the adults in the room? Like, these are people that are going, yay, because, they just are lost in this. Israel is the word from the Bible. Therefore, we have to pretend that they're, it just seems insulting to everyone's intelligence to pretend like we all don't know. At the very least, that's a complete opinion, an assumption. And on top of that, so the land of Israel from the Bible that they just created on the back of Palestine just happened. I mean, somehow it just magically becomes that territory that wasn't there before. I mean, it doesn't take much brain power to recognize how dumb that is. Anyway.
So I just want to say, I feel good about the Republican Party. I feel good about where we're going as a nation. We're killing all the right people and we're cutting your taxes.
They laugh at that. They laugh. I mean, you could argue he's trying to make a joke, but the joke is, it would be funny because it's somewhat based on what's going on. We're killing all the right people. This is a dying empire. These people are despots and oligarchs, and they're literally allowing this country to completely collapse in front of you. Or let's be real, I think it's just finally people are seeing what's been going on a long time, but it's getting far worse. Like, the larger point is the people like him are selling you out to the highest bidder everywhere, while just yelling the thing they think you want to hear. It's pretty sad. But the point is always that we are not helpless in a situation. I feel like we're this effing close to actually seeing something tip over in that conversation. I've never seen this much momentum and this much awareness of a lot of things. But for some reason, we just can't tip that over the edge. I'm going to keep talking about it. But that's sure as hell not the peace president that continues these things. Trump administration tells Congress the war law doesn't apply to cartel strikes. Not a joke. This is from yesterday. This is the Washington Post. The Office of Legal Counsel told select lawmakers that the executive branch is not bound by the War Powers Resolution, which requires congressional approval for any military action that exceeds 60 days. They're above. They're nothing that binds them to the Constitution. We're above it. Nuts. It's just not the truth. And you won't even get Washington Post going like, that's blatantly incorrect. Here's the basic reality. They just waffle about it because we are being led in this direction. Then where this connects to the next part. Greg Sargent points out, this is in regard to the bombing of Venezuelan boats, or what they claim are, which most are not. It says, this is very bad. Representative Adam Smith tells me in the briefing, Pentagon officials said they reserve the right to kill people who are affiliated with their list of narco-terror groups, which is just a mash together of whatever they claim they want to fight. He says, under questioning, they wouldn't define what affiliated even means. Don't forget they said 3 hops away. How childish these people are. So you can literally be, as somebody wrote, right, the neighbor of the neighbor of the barber of one of the people that are connected to Nicaragua, and that's 3 hops away. So you can be executed if you're in a boat they claim are. This is coming home. It's already home, is hopefully the point you're catching on to. But it's happening, not this exact point, but what they're doing with the drones we'll talk about, with everything else, with the surveillance. We are a half a step away from the argument that them or even Israel or anybody else involved can just execute people they claim are doing the thing that they're fighting at the moment. It says the administration has designated drug cartels as terrorist organizations. Now, how long until they connect that with Antifa? How long until they tell you that is where they all work together? Now you've got a foreign terrorist designation, then you overlap that with Iran. I'm just throwing it out there, just an opinion. But once that happens, it seems to check all the boxes. It says Trump has inherent constitutional authority, they claim, to order the strikes to defend the country against attacks. No one's attacking the country in regard to these boats. Not even close. Not even if they're selling drugs. That will never hold up in any court. And it says, but as legal experts note, this gives Trump the power to unilaterally execute civilians who are not in any meaningful sense akin to terrorist groups or waging war against the United States, with zero due process. Meanwhile, lots of evidence cast doubts on whether some of these people were even trafficking drugs in the first place to the United States, or in general. Insane. And as Max writes, the Trump administration folded the phony war on drugs and the fake war on terror into the narco-terrorist designation to justify executing anyone they want in the Western Hemisphere. This is an obvious pretext to conduct political assassination of figures who pose no threat to the United States. Now, look, when I say they don't have anything new, at least they found they folded plan 1 and 2 together and made a new plan. But this is what we are accustomed to. This is really just the war on terror, the war on drug, the same premise, the same long kind of undefined, we can do what we want because national security kind of game that they always do. It's just very, very, very obvious right now. And with Israel's overlap to that, I think this becomes a lot bit more concerning. Now, this is where this overlaps. So right now, we just did this show, and I really do think this show was very important. I wish it was shorter, but it's just such a powerful one. The focus was simply on this. DHS lies about deporting U.S. citizens, and then we talked at the end about the potential to readying to attack Venezuela. But the majority was simply about the lie, the blatant and ongoing, I'll prove again today with 3 more clips of how they're lying to you about whether U.S. citizens are being detained. There's tons of them, even above and beyond ProPublica, which again, it frustrates me how even people that watch this show, like, I made it clear like 17 times in that conversation that I'm not just taking ProPublica's word for it. You can look at the article and look to the source material, which is what I do from day one, every time, all the time, and find that you can prove it from court documents. You can find it in videos that I can prove it without that. That's just additional. It's on top of it. But even people that support this will go, but I don't trust ProPublica. What do I do? And it's like, it's frustrating. We need to be able to see the reality that the content, like the source is important, but the source material is the absolute. And if you can go to the source material, the person delivering that is irrelevant to the conversation. You can read the article and go, oh, here's how they're trying to use that information to manipulate you. The reality is the information is there. And above and beyond 170, on top of the fact that I showed you a U.S. citizen, because the court ruled that as such, was already deported to Laos, and they don't care. DHS lies about that. And Noam stands up. McLaughlin stands up and says, we aren't detaining U.S. citizens at all. They're just lying because they know they can get away with it right now because the president does not care about you knowing they're lying or whether people try to stop them. So watch this show if you want to see more. Here are some more examples that'll really upset you. ICE shoots a food bank worker at the Inland Empire, California, a father of 3 and a U.S. citizen. Carlos Jimenez was en route to his job at a food bank where he pulled over to support a neighbor being surrounded by ICE agents. Jimenez was shot by ICE agents in the shoulder. This is the second ICE shooting in California in 9 days, and the second in this location in 2 months. We reiterate, they write, the call to drop the unjust charges facing Carlos Jimenez and to end ICE terror in the communities. Now, this is a real story. Oh, here. Oh, I had that backwards here. Let me show you this real quick and we'll get to the story itself. So first, I wanted to show you that because it's always important to see that, nobody should ever, ever, ever take something blatant just because it was posted online or because Ryan reported it or anybody else. You guys should always take it upon yourselves to verify this stuff. The point is that was something that was out there and there's nothing to back it up. And so we have to look further. That was kind of why I wanted to show that, but we'll come back to it. This is important just to see 2 examples of just unnecessary force, which is everywhere right now. I don't think I included it. There's a clip also of, just random, a mailman walking up behind people who were arresting somebody, he was like a foot away from them, was walking up, said something, and it literally does not matter what he said. And the ICE agent turns around, ring camera caught it, and he shoves him to the ground. A federal employee. Just the point is these people are clearly of the mind they can do whatever they want. Paulie Pluthkins points this out. The Oregon DOJ submitted videos showing federal officers using extreme force on seemingly nonviolent protesters outside the U.S. ICE building. Now, we've seen this a lot. They make the excuse. They say they're impeding, right? They're blocking traffic, whatever they say. None of those things rationalize the actions they're taking, but they get backed up by the executive branch. So you can see the guy standing there, facing right there, the guy with the multicolored shirt facing away. Now, maybe he did something before that, right? Maybe he did, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, maybe. That still wouldn't change the fact that what they're doing is completely unjust and illegal. And not only that, they're running up behind him when he's not even paying attention and hit him so hard you see his neck snap back. You can legitimately hurt someone for life like that. Watch. These are just angry people, guys, who just want to punish that person for whatever perceived issue they had. And they rush him with pepper spray and go and rush him. Now, here's the thing, guys. What they do right there, which is what I believe this is people that are standing there aren't violent. They either manufacture or rationalize a thing, or I saw him throw something earlier. And so they run in, they push the guy to the ground. Then they use that incident to justify what they just did. Oh, now it's violent. We got to shut it all down. We are dealing with one of the most dishonest, our government's been doing this my entire life. Rather just enforcement, local police stations, but it does go all the way to the top. Have manufactured reasons like we saw with the Zionists, like we saw with the college thing, with Trump's overlap with it. They will manufacture reasons to shut these things down. But just know this is not new, but that's what we're seeing, that they will use even their own actions to rationalize shutting down protest. Not violent protest, but become violent because of what they create. And or rush up and bunch and, kind of push people with their shields. And if they don't just completely acquiesce, then they get arrested and they're all violent, except the fact that they were protesting legally before you started doing that. It's just unjust. And the typical screaming people online will go, yeah, I voted for this, because they don't care about anything other than dunking on Democrats. It's pathetic. This is another example where they're the same building area and they're protesting. Now, what it looks like is this woman walks to the front, one's close to the blue line, and it appears she's holding something. I think it might be a brick, but holding a brick is not illegal, regardless of what. Maybe she threw one earlier. But the way that this goes down just simply shows you it's in this moment a rationalization to go after people protesting because they don't like them there. This one they just rush up on. Tackle on the ground. Look, now let's just the idea that they need to bull rush someone to the ground, tackle them super hard. Wouldn't you at least the argument is always that everyone's trying to evade, and everyone's fleeing, and everyone's a criminal, and everyone's that's how they view you for sure. But the idea being there's no necessary force unless they're the justification for it. That's not standard operating procedure, but these aren't even cops, guys. Most of these are bounty hunter people that have been, or people that are desperate for more power in the field and have pushed their way into this. Or like Dean Cain, for example. Why the hell we think that makes sense? The point is that this is a rationalization to shut this down in every possible way, whether or not there was violent actions. Go arrest the one person you think was breaking the law. The idea to shut down the whole thing is what our government's been doing my entire life. Derek's covered this a lot in the past. And of course, the praising of this clown coming out and saying 10,000 new agents going to flood the streets. Libs TikTok, let's go, right? We're going to flood the streets with more people to continue all the stuff we've already shown you. The shooting of U.S. citizens, the detaining of U.S. citizens, the deportation of U.S. citizens, the absolute, utter, complete, across-the-board violation of U.S. rights, the complete disregard for the Constitution and everything they're doing. But yeah, let's do more of that. These people are fake patriots, fake America first. Now, Los Angeles Times, U.S. citizens shot from behind. Now, if they were America first and they cared, this is what they would be talking about. U.S. citizens shot from behind as he warned ICE agents about children gathering at a bus stop, according to his lawyers. Now, the point is, regardless of what he said, the reality of the situation is he pulls up, says something to them, and then you can even just pretend he was like, F you. Okay, he has a right. That's not a crime. And then he starts to back away, and they shoot him. I'll read the story for you. That's even what they argue. They just argue that he backed away fast and was running at them with his car, and they shot him. I can think of 3 examples right now off the top of my head where they were caught lying about exactly that in court, where they were forced to admit that didn't happen. No one talks about it other than independent media, really independent media. U.S. citizen Carlos Jimenez was shot by ICE in Ontario after warning officers about children gathering at a nearby school. Now, as you're reading this as well, in the post, you'll see the guy has a pretty strong reputation in the area, food banks and, helping the community. Not to say that means he wouldn't be able to do a crime or be opposite of what that presents. The point is, all we have is evidence of the opposite, and the way that they frame this doesn't seem to make sense. But I don't know this person, so all we have to go on is the facts, or at least what are being presented as the facts. And everything we have is pretty clear other than the officers stating something that's not backed up by anybody else. And then you add to that the many, many, many times where those officers in ICE have been caught doing just that to back up their crimes, especially one of shooting a U.S. citizen. It says his lawyers claim he was shot from behind while trying to leave, which, again, you can prove that. He was shot from behind. That's pretty clear. Federal officers say he reversed his car toward officers in a threatening manner. Now, imagine this. You're pulling up there to say something, and then they threaten you, which is what we're going to get to, and then you try to leave, and they shoot you in the back. In what world does that seem threatening to you? He's not even facing you. And the idea that you can't even reverse fast enough in a tight space like that to actually cause damage. These people are justifying, I think, punishment, because I argue he probably said something like, you guys are, ruining this country or something like that. Now, it's not what he claims, but it says the incident marks the second ICE shooting in the area in a little over a week. They said it was threatening what he did. Now, it says leaving his home in Ontario to work at a food bank Thursday morning, Carlos Jimenez pulled over to warn a group of federal agents that he should wrap up their stop of a car quickly because school-aged children would soon be gathering there to take the bus. Now, look, you can all day long argue they're making that up, but we don't know that for sure. And it's just as likely he did say that, and they felt like he was just trying to push them out of the way, and they reacted ridiculously like they do almost everywhere else. Or it's just as likely that versus him saying something just insulting. None of it justifies what they did. The only thing you can question in this is whether or not he did threateningly drive his car at them. And then you should ask whether that even itself rationalizes executing a U.S. citizen, which is what could have happened. It says in the following moments, the attorneys said the ICE officer shot him. He's a father of three. From behind. Now, Tricia McLaughlin, a spokesperson for the Department of Homeland Security, said at the time that Jimenez had, quote, attempted to run officers over by reversing directly at them without stopping. And then the shots were defensive. I mean, so you're going to tell me that ICE officers are now feeling the need to shoot at U.S. citizens because the car, like, why couldn't they have just moved out of the way? Like, let's just even say they was actually trying to hit them. Where do we get to this point to where officers can just execute you in the streets because they think they're in risk? Their job is inherently risky. And in many examples, there are people that are seen as a risk that turn out to not be. They're misinterpreted as such. And that's why it's their job to supposedly serve and protect, not execute and ask questions later. But that's where we are today. And we've been there a long time. The militarization of the police happened a long time ago. And it got a rapid kick under, Bush to Trump. But that's the time frame this really kind of went out of control. And it says Jimenez, 25, was charged with federal court with assault. And so this is always how this goes, right? The assault, so in many cases, they were already being accosted, right? That's not this case, but they'll be at the car trying to arrest them. And then they get charged with the assault that happened after that started. So you guys came up and unjustly did something. And then, the point is that they keep, in many cases, unjustly so, where there was no assault. Or they tackled him and their arm bumped them and they claim he punched him in the face. Or I'm talking about examples we can prove, which we'll get into in a second. Many, many, many. Well, in fact, the show I just went over is many of them where they were caught lying. But I'm going to show you just what Grok has to say about Trish McLaughlin. But it says he was telling them, excuse me, this is what he claims. Can you guys please wrap this up? And immediately, he says, the masked agents pulled out a gun and exchanged some words. He says the agent is also shaking his pepper spray. Now, he says he's in fear and he's trying to get out of the situation. So the police don't dispute this. The idea is that they said that they were already worried, which I'll read to you, and they pulled this gun, which why would you pull your gun in that situation if he hadn't yet started to reverse at you dangerously? You see my point? So you pull a gun on an innocent person who is there not breaking any rules, and then he moves the car and you open fire on him. The point is the lawyer says he was in fear something would happen. I mean, look, with the way the world is and what they've been doing, that's not unrealistic. And he says the agents had their cars had blocked one southern lane on the avenue and jutted out into the second. The point is he had to reverse to get away from the point he was in, which is backed up by people in the area. Now it says then there was a shot from the side, back passenger window to the car. From the side, back passenger window. Now think about that. Does it sound like somebody who was behind the car about to get hit? Pretty sure it's not. And it says the use of deadly force is to be used as a last resort. Coming out to communities with guns drawn is the opposite. Now, that's the truth. Ask standard operating procedure for a police officer. That's just, we're in a very bad way right now. A lot of the IDF training, which is not a joke, we've talked about for years, very much does play a factor. Now, I'll get to it later. And now an ICE agent identified as EO. Seriously? So now we don't even get to know the guy's name, not even through the media asking questions. Like, these are faceless, unaccountable automatons who can murder people without any accountability or shoot them without accountability. How is this America first? How is this in any way in line with what even you guys promised was going to happen? This is shocking. Now, if let's just even say this was only against illegal immigrants, I would still argue what they're doing was shocking. But the reality is it's mostly people who are not breaking the law, mostly people who aren't even here illegally in regard to the crimes I'm talking about. The point is that there are crimes being committed against people who are here illegally, but they're still crimes. But on top of that, what they're doing is going to change this country forever. And you know that if you're paying attention. The ICE, the deployable forces, Trump now saying, by the way, that he's going to have 500 deployable military in every state in the country. Yeah, no big deal. Casual martial law, no big deal. The Lexus then stopped. Okay. So the ICE agent identified as EO, because we just don't get to know, approached Jimenez in his Lexus and told him to leave. That's what they're claiming. Then the agent holstered his firearm and pulled out his pepper spray, according to the complaint. You had your gun drawn before you even knew what was happening, before he was even in. Think about that. Now it says he pulled his car forward to the left. Quote, the Lexus then stopped, turned its wheels, and then rapidly accelerated in reverse back toward a Border Patrol agent named in the complaint as Officer NJ. Are you kidding me? The reason is because they won't be allowed. Nobody can bring them to court. You don't know who they are. You can't have them testify. You can't find evidence. You can't get their body cams. That's insane, guys. This is completely illegal. And it says, and the Honda, it says, named in the complaint, and it says, and the Honda, the agents had stopped, which had 3 people inside. Okay, so the bottom line is, based on what the lawyer says and based on the circumstances, so this will come out in court if they actually charge him, which I don't think they will. He was trying to back up to get away exactly the way he thought they were trying to tell him to. And on top of that, if he was going quickly, it's because they were literally pointing guns at him and pepper spray. That's what seems to make sense. Now, it says McLaughlin called it at the time, quote, another example of the threats our ICE officers are facing day in and day out, and they risk their lives to enforce the law. Okay, well, she also said, where was it? Oh, I think it's right here. So the point, before we get past the article, U.S. citizen shot from behind as he warned ICE agents. So regardless of anything, I mean, look, the idea, guys, is this cannot be allowed. You can't have a situation where these people who are nameless, faceless people in a government enforcement squad, you're opening fire on U.S. citizens without any real justification in a situation which does not merit that. On top of it, which they're breaking laws in every which way, and then to charge him with assault for something that didn't even, realize it didn't happen. He didn't hit anybody. They claim he tried to, didn't, and they shot him. And then then you charge him with assault? I mean, guys, this is just beyond the pale. Okay. Grok. Now, and again, I bring this up every time, but I think it's the reason I find this to be important. And Elon just said they just updated Grok, right? Now it shouldn't be so woke for you. Well, I find it increasingly interesting to show the Republicans more than anything that Grok says they're wrong. Now, this is Elon's Republican Grok fighting the woke algorithm, right? Okay, how many times has Tricia McLaughlin, a spokesman for the Department of Homeland Security, been caught provably lying about an immigration enforcement? She has made at least 7 statements that were later proven false through video evidence, official records, court documents, or contradictory DHS internal statements, meaning that they later put a statement out that proved she was lying. Like the kid they claimed they arrested in coming over from Mexico, who was a U.S. citizen, who had an ID on him, and they literally just said, we picked him up in Mexico, because they had to cover their story. They lied. I talked about it then. These falsehoods primarily aimed, as Grok says, to downplay controversies around ICE, on their arrests, detentions, operations, often by misrepresenting timelines, identities of agents, victim details, or agency practices. Now, here's an example. Democrat lawmakers body slammed ICE. Remember that one? And all the screaming people like Torter and the rest who all came out and said that's what happened. Well, their own video showed that no body slamming took place. No, that didn't get as much attention, did it? Benny Johnson and Nick Sorter didn't come out and go, we were wrong. They just rushed into the next lie. But they were lying about that. Now, this is not to say that there was not unjust actions by Democrats. That would be an assumption on your part. The point is to say that that one claim was false. In this case, number 2, a detained mother who lost her baby in ICE custody was a wanted killer, they claimed, because everyone was upset about why they had her. Well, no criminal record or warrant ever existed. They were lying, and their own records confirmed that she was a nonviolent detainee. They lied about her because they had to cover their butts. Still got no attention. Now, by the way, guys, these stories, every one of these we've covered in the past. On top of that, there is source material you can check for yourself. Do not take Grok's word for it. I never do. Video of a Chicago area teen girl's arrest, or violent arrest, was from a year ago. That was McLaughlin. I remember that when we talked about it. And she said, that's an old video, you fake news Democrats. She said it was a burglary from Chicago PD and it wasn't even ICE. Well, she lied or was wrong. And I argue in some cases, they're taking the Nick Sorter post and thinking they're real. It says video metadata, bystander footage, and local police confirmed that it was recent and it was ICE. Isn't that funny? Okay. 13-year-old boy detained. Most of these are in October, by the way. 13-year-old boy detained by ICE in Massachusetts possessed a firearm, a 5 to 7 inch knife, they said. ICE's own field report and family statements showed no weapons. The boy was unarmed. DHS quite literally then said that. Do you realize how insane this is? How many times? This is just the ones that they're pointing out. And these are major statements that you can prove they knew they were lying about in order to protect their agents who are breaking the law and hurt American citizens. This one, ICE does not arrest or deport U.S. citizens. Yeah, we know that game. That was Bondi. They've all said that. And they're all lying to you. Actually, not Bondi. I think it was McLaughlin and Nome. October, children were never zip-tied during ICE operation in Chicago. Well, eyewitness videos and the attorney reports showed kids zip-tied, hearing dismissal, Supreme Court filings confirmed stops based on ethnicity. We've covered all of this. It was very clear. And there was photographs of it. So these people are just desperately lying. And I think it's because they know that if they just yell the lie loud enough, people will just ignore. They'll go with what the team says. Senator Alex Padilla did not identify himself when they came in the thing and there was a whole conflict and whatever. Well, it turned out the video showed him repeatedly identifying himself. We talked about that one too. It's just wild, isn't it? This is just McLaughlin and just from Grok. I guarantee you there's a lot more than that. So talking about the surveillance overlap before we get into some Epstein points and then we get into the false flag, which I think people want to hear about. Dropsite News writes, ICE buys social media surveillance tool tested by Israel and Gaza. We showed you this in the last show. ICE just bought a social media surveillance bot. Now, this is Israeli tech. Now, we talked about the Signal Labs. We talked about, where's the other one? The Customs Enforcement Agency. That was ICE. Where was it? I guess, what was it again? Remember in the chat, remember what it was. Signal Labs, and it was I thought it started with a C. I thought it was... Anyways, the point is, on the last show, we covered it. The point was both of them are, completely immersed with Israeli tech. Some of them are R&D in Israel. Some of them are still run by Israeli UN 8200 alumni and current members. Or the funniest part for me was the one where they were claiming it's a U.S.-based company and it's this U.S. and you go down and every single part of it was at, R&D's in Israel. It's run by Israeli UN 8200. It's built by them, founded by them, but a U.S. citizen runs it, so it's a U.S. company. That's what's happening today. So the bottom line over all of it is that they're working with ICE. As we just showed you what they're doing, they're training with the IDF. They're using IDF tech to surveil Americans. This has to matter to people who are not blind to what's happening. So on that note, Gray Zone had an article that came actually from Do Not Panic Substack. This is from yesterday. Immediately after October 7th, a little-known company shipped over 100 reconnaissance drones to Israel for use in its siege of Gaza. Having been battle-tested, as they claim, which is when they use munitions on Palestinians, innocent people, and then claim it's battle-tested when they sell it to the world. Having been battle-tested on Palestinian civilians, the UAVs are now being used to surveil you all across America. AI-powered quadcopter drones used by the IDF to commit genocide in Gaza are flying over American cities, surveilling protesters and automatically uploading millions of images to the evidence database. Biometrics, things that are not their right to take and are being sent back to Israel and are very much violating your rights and being used to identify, to find connection. Like the idea is these protesters, they're trying to find a way to rationalize shutting it down. To claim that you have a side connection to some Antifa member that's connected to Venezuela. Who knows what they're trying to do. The drones are made by a company called Skydio, which in the last few years has gone from relative obscurity to quietly become a multi-billion-dollar company and the largest drone manufacturer in the United States. Well, you know how this works. All right. These are the players infiltrating these ideas. There's plenty of other drone companies. This is one that's patched together by intelligence and Israeli influence and are being now randomly out of nowhere became like the thing across the country and going around the world. It's not secret. The U.S. must realize that almost, I would even argue probably even a better profitable deal. This is about surveillance control. This is the control grid. The extent of Skydio drone usage across the U.S. and the extent to which their usage has grown in just a few years is extraordinary. The company has contracts with more than 800 law enforcement and security agencies across the country, up from 320 from last year, March of last year, exploding. And their drones are being launched hundreds of times a day to monitor people in towns and cities across the country. So you have Israeli and intelligence tech from the United States surveilling you all over the country. Why is that something Americans want? In fact, it's not what they want. In fact, nobody voted for that. But this is something Trump has rolled out more than anybody ever. Let's be honest about that. Why do you think that is? You think that's in your interest? You think it's going to be only about immigrants and they're all going to go away? No, guys, the military won't. The drone system won't. The counter surveillance won't. The AI run, they won't, guys. This is your future. And it seems to be inevitable unless we can actually step up and recognize that it's not one side versus the other. Skydio has extensive links with Israel, of course. Now, we went over that in the previous show, as well as the overlapping tech behind it all. Not in the Skydio in particular, but the general point of the background, startup city dynamic. According to my research, it writes almost every large American city has signed a contract with Skydio in the last 18 months. That's where we are. Biden to Trump, ushering in the control grid right under your nose. In Miami, Skydio drones are being used to spy on spring breakers. And in Atlanta, the company has partnered with the Atlanta Police Foundation to install, a permanent drone station with a massive new Atlanta public safety training center. That's what they're doing, is building these little ports where they can charge and just land back in. They're just like, this is the new force. Detroit recently spent nearly $300,000 on 14 Skydio drones, according to a city procurement report. Last month, ICE bought an X-10D Skydio drone, which automatically tracks and pursues a target. Yeah, think about that future, right? We're seeking drones. That's already there, guys. They're using it in Gaza right now. U.S. Customs and Border Protection has bought 33 of the same drones since July. This is just beginning. This is going to explode. The AI system behind Skydio drones is powered by, guess what? NVIDIA chips. We've already talked about the overlap with that, the Israel connection. It just doesn't stop, and enables their operation without a human user. The drones have, and remember, the connection being through Trump's administration and the socialist communist kind of overlap of, there's so many examples of these. The drones have thermal imaging cameras and can operate in places where GPS doesn't work, the so-called GPS denied environments, right? So meaning that they're next generation, where they're not just, stuck to having to operate within these ecosystems. They're now able to go where GPS is not required. They also reconstruct buildings and other infrastructure in 3D and can fly at more than 30 miles per hour. Skydio's first investor in 2015 was none other than Andreessen Horowitz. Yeah, your buddy Mark Andreessen, the good oligarchy he wants you to believe, and Ben Horowitz. And both are notorious Zionists. The saturation of U.S. police departments with drone technology so closely connected to Israel, technology used to carry out war crimes, is frightening, if not unsurprising. Skydio drones will be central to the rapidly advancing, as he frames, proto-fascism in the U.S. and the crackdown on Antifa and other so-called domestic terrorists by the Trump administration. Now, the point is, even if you think that Antifa is exactly what they claim, this doesn't go away. This becomes the infrastructure forever. And then you become the next possible terrorist because you're saying things the government doesn't like. In this context, the bigger surprise is that the rapid expansion of Israel-linked surveillance drone technology across America has so far gone largely under the radar. Skydio is also a large supplier to the Department of Defense. Of course it is. Look, if you're ever worried about Israel influence, infiltration, tech-wise, and everything other into our government, guys, that has long since happened. Long since happened. I don't think I have it right here, but there's the clip of, perfect. I do have it. This is not necessarily what we're getting into, but just so you can hear this clip again, what you're seeing in this discussion right now is the Department of Defense being, using Israel to, whether you think they're, there's one way to look at it, that the U.S. government is completely overtaken by Israel, and that they know what they're doing. Maybe you don't think that. Maybe you think it's the other way around. But either way, the point is that Israel, using these things, does have inside access, back doors. This is what they do. They're very public about this. In fact, the clip I won't play again, but the one from 60 Minutes is making it very clear. The world is our stage. We build fake companies which affect the supply chain. We can do this anywhere in the world. We just heard them. We just heard the Mossad, ex-Mossad head, say that we do this in literally every country. It's everywhere in your face. So this is just simply, I'm blanking on his name all of a sudden, Wilkerson, telling you that that's the case, that they own the Pentagon, right? We just need to be real about where this is. Otherwise, it's never going to change.
It's unquestionable that the Epstein business was heavily influenced, let me put it that way, by Mossad.
And so that's somehow emblematic on these huge geopolitical issues.
Yes, I watched Mossad take over the Pentagon. In 2002, the Pentagon was infiltrated by Mossad. They did not need any identification to get through the river entrance of the building. They went upstairs to Douglas Feith, the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, the third most powerful man in the Defense Department. Occasionally, they went to the second most powerful man, Paul Wolfowitz, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, and they had run of the Pentagon. Donald Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, said to my boss one time, "Hell, I don't run my building. Mossad does."
It's just so crazy. Well, to finish the article, it says the Department of Defense recently signed a contract to provide the U.S. Army with reconnaissance drones. You know, or maybe they blow up in a certain circumstance because Israel executes a certain agenda because the U.S. government's no longer doing their deeds. You know, kind of thing that I think the U.S. power structure is very much aware of. Right? You've all got a piece of Israel in your pocket. They're not stupid. Skydio shows once again how Gaza is the laboratory for weapon makers, the place where new surveillance and apartheid technologies are simply tested before being refined and used in the West. And next year, Skydio is rolling out new indoor drones. We can only speculate as to what extent these new drones were informed by the learnings accrued via genocide. So I'll play this clip again, since this is the point. This segment. Now remember, this is the U.S. veteran, I believe, Green Beret, who worked in Israel with the GHF. You know, really the ISIS-linked gangs they pretend is the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. And he told you, he reported, Tucker and plenty of others, that he watched them execute people. He watched them set them up like a Hunger Games situation, and they all tried to debunk this guy and discredit him. And the reality is it's only become more clear. What he's telling you in this clip, as he's continued to speak out about this, is that what he saw there is that they're bringing this home. I don't know how many more examples we need to see, or people that who are there, who see it, who are telling you this is coming if we don't do something about it. I argue part of it's mostly already here, but we still have, we can still do something about it.
Look at what's happening every day. I've been there. I have trained with them. I have been to Israel where ICE agents and DEA agents and other three-letter agencies train with the Israelis, with the gendarmerie and the Israeli police force, training with them. And they bring those tactics back here. The oppression that we export, we bring it right back here. Look around. We are the ones suffering. Children in Gaza are suffering. Fathers, mothers, families are suffering. Every day on TV, we see a Palestinian father carrying their dead child. And little Marco and Ambassador Huckabee and our president make jokes and celebrate. A ceasefire? What a joke. The ceasefire wasn't even in effect for 30 seconds before Israel dropped another bomb. And what did they say? We can get away with it. Wake up, people. Every day we pay Israel our tax dollars so they can continue to bomb and kill unarmed civilians. We bomb boats off the coast of Venezuela. We blow up Colombians in fishing boats and say, oops. If you don't think that won't come to your neighborhood, think again. I have seen it. It is coming. ICE agents train in Israel, and they bring that back here, and they bring the same tactics. You don't have to read the secret files to see what's happening on our streets every day. For all you that serve your country, all of us that have served our country, for those of you out here in uniform serving your country, if you're a YouTube influencer, Israel will pay you $7,000 per post. You know who they pay that with? Our tax dollars. Our government makes us stupid, and we should not put up with it.
Here. You know, it's just funny how, this is a U.S. veteran, right? Very, how many over the years we've seen come back and tell you exactly the same story. They've been there. They were a part of it, guys. You know, it's the ability for us to just kind of box out what we don't want to see in this country is unparalleled. Now, an overlapping point that I want to go in depth in a future show, possibly. We've talked about this a lot. I just found this interesting. This is 1984. You've seen this account. First post on the 31st of October. He says, pay attention, or attention, excuse me. I think they said over here. Oh, that's weird. I guess I just read. That's funny. I thought it said pay attention. Attention, it says, you are not safe on this platform, Twitter. Did you know Twitter has an R&D in Tel Aviv? Does. The algorithm and bot networks are being used to psyop the unsuspected public. Now, this is his opinion, but he does post a thing. You make a case. Now, I think this is very obvious. We've talked about the Authentics overlap, which in some cases is still in effect in regard to the platform. They're using other different overlaps. Another one, by the way, with an Israel connection. But it says Elon Musk is 100% complicit in genocide and treason for swaying the 2024 election and spying on citizens. This is what he's writing. Now, bottom line, this is from Grok. It says X, R&D, Twitter, Tel Aviv is not a neutral engineering site. It is a de facto 8,200 forward operating base with direct code, data, and personnel pipelines to Israeli military intelligence. The spying is not hypothetical. It's a structural, incentivized, and already leaking. Now, again, this is, you take this for what you will. You know, I believe, because this is something that's very difficult to prove in regard to, like, you know, people will argue, oh, there's probably more than one. The bottom line is that this platform and what they've done is what we really need to look at. What they've done with Israel, what Elon's done, the censorship they've already carried out, the blatant, obvious, hypocritical censorship. This is just simply adding more to the reality of how, you know, or CHEQ and the different things they've worked with that are literally connected to intelligence. Authentics is intelligence for Israel. So this is just more to that. And he's going through the different questions he's asked and so on. And he adds to this one simply saying this is a verified backdoor, or there is a verified backdoor on Twitter that is a direct pipeline to Israeli intelligence. And he says, as one engineer wrote, we built zero trust for ads. For 8,200, we built a backdoor. You know, I don't think this is that far. I think the reality of where we are, I think this is more than we realize. But Twitter is clearly a central part for this, manipulation. And on top of that, Max Blumenthal points out, the app that claims to promote and protect the freedom of expression would rather you fixate on violent and pornographic adult content than see a documentary that methodically peels back the mask of American Zionism to reveal its ghastly face. He did a documentary on Batar USA, which is just one of the most terrifyingly extremist groups in this country. And it says, that's why our film is restricted, right? Isn't that right? Free speech platform, you know, all the free speech absolutists. Didn't Elon Musk just literally again? And then James Woods, you know, he saved free speech. The guys are just ridiculous. They said there's news. X has labeled the Gray Zone's new film about the Zionist Batar USA group as an age-restricted adult content that might not be appropriate. Guys, they are straight up censoring content. You know this. Now, the reality of this, I mean, you should watch this. This is an in-depth look at what we've been talking about Batar and what they've did, not just floating, you know, threatening people in this country, U.S. citizens with pagers, or working with the Trump administration to effectively deport people who are here legally and try to get Americans deported. It goes far deeper into what this group is actually. This is a terrorist organization in every sense of the word. Now, I'm going to play this clip probably at the end again. I didn't know exactly where I wanted to put this, but this clip is just chilling. Mark Levin, hardcore Zionist, pretend America first. What he says right here, also at the Republican Jewish Coalition, is just blatant. As I said, the quiet part out loud. He's just telling you that you're not going to change this with your podcast, with your radio show. We're going to stop you. You're trying to change the world. We're not going to let it happen. Like, it's just insane, the kind of entitlement, I guess, but just, you know, these people believe, these megalomaniacs. I mean, they do have a lot of power and influence, but the idea that, like, and also just to realize what we're actually talking about here, the status quo we're currently in, the ongoing genocide, the completely unconstitutional breakdown in this country, the reality of censorship, the reality of Israel being allowed to do whatever it wants in the world. These people are going, you won't be able to stop it. I disagree. But the point is, I think these people are very clearly trying to project power right now because I think they're desperate. I think they have lost everything. And I'm talking about Zionism and its influence over power structures in the world. Well, I shouldn't say necessarily lost the influence just yet, but are losing the battle of information that will lead to that. And I said, this really does speak for itself. Anyone truly America first, meaning simply those who fight for this country, not the government, should see what a risk these people pose to genuine liberty and self-determination.
just want the anti-American, anti-Israel, anti-West crowd to just want the anti-American.
Not sure why I did that just now.
Anti-Israel, anti-West crowd to understand something.
Now, I don't know why I just refreshed on that right there, but the point was that what he's talking about is anyone that they think is, people that support Palestine, people that call out Trump's actions. You hear what's crazy? Like people that protest on No King's Day. You realize that the majority of them, that they're just at least what they're claiming, I can't speak to their minds, were fighting against what they thought was destroying the country. How you can ever turn that into anti the country? It's just how it's a perfect example of how kind of just cartoonish things have gotten. Again, like the complete, not just a well-crafted lie, but like the the opposite, the misrepresentation. But he's saying, you anti-West, anti-Israel. Okay, so when I'm going, Israel is committing genocide, he says you're an anti-Semite, anti-Israel, anti-American. Well, I'm none of those things. I'm anti-Zionism, or anti what Zionism is doing, quite frankly. And reality in regard to Israel, well, if that was not the problem, I wouldn't be against Israel. It's not about the country, it's about the government. But they will always make this case that you're somehow lumped into all the things. Right? Remember back in the day, you're an Assad apologist. You're a Saddam apologist. They've been doing this game forever. Now, they just seem to kind of mash it all together. War on terror, war on drugs, right? You're anti-West, anti-American, anti-Israel, and we're just going to shut you. And what are they doing? Well, we're going to stop you. You're not allowed to do these things. You're not allowed to say what you want anymore. That's the old America. Hashtag winning. Well, let me start. Now I will actually start it over since I talked, but.
Want the anti-American, anti-Israel, anti-West crowd to understand something. You're going to have to come through me and millions of people just like me, and you're not going to make it. You think your stupid little podcast, your stupid little subscription program,
you scared,
or your little TV show, or maybe you have a little radio show, is going to change the world like hell it is, not if I and everybody else have something to say about it.
Right. Okay, so the point is you don't want to change the world, right? So everything's good. Right? There's no problems, right? Everything's great, right? There's no issue in the United States, no issue in Israel. Everything's great. I mean, whether you think it's great, his point is we're not changing the world. Like, isn't it a funny point that historically these guys are the ones that are trying to convince you that they want to change the world the way that you want it? Even though they're usually lying anyway, it's just kind of a funny point we've been talking about. The mask off, stepping out of the shadows, the technocracy, the globalists. They're stepping out and basically going, look, this is what we're doing and shut up. Like it just seems very clear. Whether that's because they think they're powerful or because they're truly seeing that they're losing, I don't know. But isn't that just striking? That, your stupid little podcast. I think what he means by your little radio show is Tucker Carlson is not a little radio show. That's just funny how these people, because that's largely what they were kind of downplaying is Tucker and all these people. And no, the reality is that the world is very much recognizing this. Now, whether Tucker's truly calling it out and it's more opportunism or not, I don't know, but I'll support him calling it out regardless. And this is, I think, people who are losing control, not the other way around. Now, I think, but I'm going to go through this really quickly. I want to get to the Kash Patel part. But this just updates on Epstein, Massey. I pointed this out the other day. He simply said, not a hoax. Release the files, investigate. Sorry, I'm not going to I'm not going along to get along. And then he pointed to the New York Times reporting. JP Morgan alerted U.S. to Epstein transfers involving Wall Street. Said, where did $1 billion go? Point is, there's just a ton amount of information and evidence out there that they're dragging their feet on. They don't want you to see. You might have seen that the prince, no longer the prince, was stripped of title. It's actually pretty crazy to me. They're over here going fake news. It's a hoax. It's all, why Epstein? Who's that? And then over here in the UK, this guy loses his title because of it. Massey says this is a victory for victims. However, it appears that rich and powerful men in the United States have immunities and privileges exceeding those of royalty in Britain. Speaker Johnson is avoiding a vote to releasing Epstein files by keeping the House in recess. It's not a hoax. Prince Andrew will be stripped of his prince title and be shown the door at the Royal Lodge. Now, this is interesting. This is what General Flynn points out. He says, Prince Andrew should go to prison if he abused children. Why? Because what their statement was, because Prince Andrew's trying to claim that, basically nothing really happened, right? But the king takes action against his own brother with the strongest of statements, he writes. And here's what the statement says. His Majesty has today initiated a formal process to remove the style, titles, and honors of Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew will now be known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. His lease on Royal Lodge has to date provided him with legal protection to continue his residence. Formal notice has now been served to surrender the lease, and he will move to alternative private accommodation. These censures are deemed unnecessary, notwithstanding the fact that he continues to deny the allegations. It ends by saying, their majesties wish to make clear that their thoughts and utmost sympathies have been and will remain with the victims and survivors of any and all forms of abuse. So it just seems very clear that they're insinuating that he very much did abuse children. So it's kind of crazy to think that the U.S. government, the ones that built the momentum, the current administration, on exposing all this, are the ones now acting like it's not there, when even the Prince Andrew just lost everything and his own brother is going, he did some bad things. That's just pretty wild to me. Now, on top of that, Massey says, when leaders of my own party protect sex traffickers, spend our grandkids into oblivion and fund endless wars, I oppose them. And it is literally what's happening. That's not to say that we should blindly trust Massey. As I've said 1,000 times, I don't trust any of them. I don't support government. The point is that whether or not he means the things he's doing right now, I support him doing them. Like this is the point and yet doesn't seem to get across to some. People like it, but I mean, good intentionally, though, or good intentionally is not a right way to say that, but with good intentions, people will reach out and be like, but why do you support Massey? Because I thought he was, isn't he a politician? I thought I thought we weren't supposed to do that. And if you watch the show, I think you would recognize by now that the point is that these people I'm not leading into the person. It's the content, the idea of saying those things. Anybody, you should go, that's a correct thing. I've said this many, many times. I hope he's a real person. I genuinely do. And like I've said 1,000 times, it'll take a long time of not just one administration, of a person like this standing by the principles, because of how much evidence we have of basically everybody else lying to us all the time. That's not to say that we shouldn't point to it, right? So I don't want you to support any politician, quite frankly. I don't think it's even in your interest. But he says, I won't be a yes man, and this infuriates them. They want to silence me to take away your voice in DC. All right. Why wouldn't we want that to be true? That he means those things, is what I mean. That he is fighting for those things. I certainly hope so. And I won't pretend otherwise unless there's evidence to it, but I'm not going to blindly accept it either. Question everything. Here are some clips from Massey. That's why I'm saying all that, because these are important clips that he's saying, but it doesn't mean we should blindly trust him. It has to be the constant roundabout thing. So here's a clip there's 3 clips I'll play quickly about him discussing why he thinks this is taking place.
He's calling it the Schumer shutdown, but I'm calling it the Epstein recess. Not only are we shut down, we're in recess, and that's unconventional, unprecedented in the 13 years I've been in Congress. The other thing that Speaker Johnson established a precedent on himself. Until Speaker Johnson had been Speaker, I never had observed this, but he swore in 2 members during a pro forma session. They happened to be Republicans, and now has no real good reason for why he's not swearing in the Democrat during a pro forma session. Okay, to the Epstein thing. One of my favorite memes on the internet, before I get there, let me set it up. The president himself has called the Epstein files a hoax. And we know it's not a hoax. My press conference with Ro Khanna involved almost a dozen survivors of Epstein's sex trafficking ring. And they were there to tell us there are other men who they were trafficked to. And they've together collectively, they know what some of those names are. In fact, through their lawyer has informed me there are at least 20 names, and he described their professions, which I said to the FBI director, Kash Patel, when he was there. But getting back to one of my favorite memes on the internet was, it's too bad Epstein killed himself before he realized this was a hoax.
Yeah.
Like, if it's a hoax, why are they resisting releasing the files? He's flipped. One, his rich and powerful friends who've donated to him or go to his dinner parties. Like, he doesn't want to embarrass them. And because, and they may in fact not even be guilty of a crime. They may just be very embarrassed that they were having extramarital sex, you know, with these women.
That's a really important point to think about, right? And it's the same argument, though. They're still hiding information that protects terrible, dangerous people. But this is kind of the point about Trump. I'm not going to say I know for sure. I think it's pretty likely with a lot of other factors that there was something going on. But overall, he could just think that his name being present because he knew him would be enough for people to use against him, which is probably true. Nonetheless, he's still hiding all of this, which is what I read it as. I'm on the fence about whether or not he's, you know, part of the criminal, you know, just because Trump's a criminal in other aspects, like every one of these presidents, does not mean we should assume we always wait for the facts. But the fact that he's still holding his feet, or, you know, him and Johnson are dragging this out and doing their best to not let it out, I mean, it speaks for itself. It's just really obvious. That's why most people, as someone said in the chat, or that was about the Zionist point, but average people, just who don't even pay attention to this stuff, are getting wind of these things. You're talking about Epstein, as the chat said, somebody's wife said he asked him about the Zionists freaking out. It's become so mainstream that's why they're drowning. They are worried that this is not going to go back in the bottle, and it won't. That's the point. But this, I mean, I think you know as well as I that the Epstein conversation overlaps with all of this. If you don't know why, the most obvious point is because Israel very clearly has a sexual blackmail network that they use, and Epstein was a part of that. And so that is one way of a large apparatus of ways that they can manipulate and influence foreign policy of other countries. And that's what he's kind of pointing at right here, of the people that are, you know, trying to hide this. I mean, he's insinuated 1,000 ways that Johnson and Trump are either covering up for other people or are criminals themselves, and that's why they want it out, which is seemingly likely choices.
For instance, that they were having extramarital sex, you know, with these women, for instance. So that's one thing. But I think there's also the intelligence aspect of this that goes even deeper. Maybe Trump is on one plane and he's thinking, I can't embarrass my friends. But there may be people in the administration who are career people, who are thinking on another plane.
Yeah, like that's what the unelected power structure is, like career, long-term, you know, that. But the Trump is still hiding the horrible thing because he does, you know, that means that he cares more about their interest than he does about American interest, which I think we should be obvious about now.
In the administration who are career people, who are thinking on another plane, they're like, well, let's convince Trump he's going to embarrass his friends, when in reality what we're trying to do is protect our sources and methods, which may involve sex trafficking.
Right.
And we don't want to embarrass our partner, Israel, in this time when the popularity for their war or support for their war is at an all-time low. And now
don't miss how quickly he went from sex trafficking to Israel. I don't think that was by accident. I mean, that was the point, because the sex trafficking, sex blackmail network of Epstein was Israel and the CIA. But the point is that he just either he's playing this right, just like I would argue they would, like Trump pretending he's going to end the Fed, you know, to get you to be on their side, like Gabbard did with ending wars, right? It's not new, but nonetheless, I support him doing it right now.
We're going to find out that their defense minister, Ehud Barak, you know, was documented with Jeffrey Epstein 36 times. Probably even while he was defense minister. He had previously been prime minister. I don't know that he knew Epstein during that period. I'm not sure how much of those dates overlap, but there are reasons that they want to protect them. There's reasons he's flipped. And I don't think his children or J.D. Vance or even Pam Bondi or Kash Patel were read into all that when they originally said all of this stuff should be released. I mean, if it's a hoax, what were those binders that Pam Bondi gave out? Was she just fueling a hoax?
Yeah, that said most transparent administration in history written on the binder. People are such ridiculous clowns. You know, that's not something you write on your own binder and then release. Like, it's just so silly how bad that's the kind of point I'm making. Like, even doing that from in like a careful way, that it's not like somebody else did it about you. It's still silly because they're not. But for them to do it themselves and put their own binders and release them themselves, that's the kind of point I'm making about how they're just not good at this. It's just clumsy, blatant PR in your face when we know they're lying. Don't forget, by the way, DC Drano, Libs of TikTok, what's her name? Liz, what's her name? They were all there, had their binders, and then went on to lie about it like the rest of the players in this game.
About Miriam Adelson, the dual citizen, who even Trump believes she's more loyal to Israel than to the United States. She's one of the billionaires who's given over $2 million so far to take me out. One is Paul Singer, who controls the Washington Free Beacon, and he got this hit piece written about $500 because he didn't like seeing his name in the news because I'm putting it in the news. And then he's like a member of the World Economic Forum, and he's your consummate globalist.
Yeah, on the side of Trump, of course, because that makes sense, doesn't it? It does to me.
Probably. He's got ties to military contractors too. Like, I don't want to get this wrong, but he has ownership in some of these companies, I think. And then it certainly holds stocks in them. And then John Paulson. This is the interesting one. Now, he's only given a mere $250,000 to the effort to take me out of Congress. He's like of the billionaires, he's the least of the billionaires.
Just so blatant.
The least generous of the billionaires to their cause, which is to take out a true American first congressman. He is in Epstein's Black Book. And I love to point that out because this is why, when you said, does this relate to Gaza? Does the Epstein thing relate? The universe of billionaires is small enough that it's all related. The people that control the newspaper that's writing the hit piece are the same people that want the war to go on, are the same people trying to take me out, are friends and co-donors with people who knew Jeffrey Epstein enough that Jeffrey Epstein had their personal cell numbers in his Black Book. It doesn't mean that John Paulson had sex with women, non-consensual sex, or sex trafficked. It doesn't even mean he was at the island. It just means that he was one of maybe 500 or 1,000 people that Jeffrey Epstein was concerned with enough to have his personal contact information.
Yeah, somebody says in the chat, I reached out through somebody who had a meeting with him, who did relay my information, gave him my card, and said I'd love to have an interview with Massey. And he'd at least in that engagement said that he would reach out. I don't think this is the crazy thing for me. For all I know, him and a ton of other people have reached out that I've never been allowed to see. My email I don't want to get into it all now, but it is so inherent that these days I just basically hand out my phone number to random people because at least I think I'll get my texts. The problem is I just goes to spam or just literally doesn't come through. I've actually proven that emails have been sent that don't even end up in my spam or anywhere more than once. It's just crazy. That's the world we live in right now. My point, though, is that I did reach out and maybe I didn't get a response. Maybe he did and I didn't get it, blah, blah, blah. The point is I would love to interview him. If you guys have a connection to him and you want to put it in front of him, I would love to talk with him. And I'll be very fair. I won't be a softball, but I'll be very fair because I want to believe that he is going to be continuing his principled stances, but I'm also going to ask tough questions, and I'd like to believe that that's what he would demand if he is what he puts forward. But the one thing that stands out to me, I agree with all he's saying. The one thing that stands out to me is just, it does feel strange, right? That he could be so kind of a cavalier about basically pointing out the biggest thing, like the crux of the thing, like people that could literally take you out and everyone in the world could know you did it and you still wouldn't go to jail. That's the kind of reality we're talking. And yet he just seems like he's kind of cavalier about it. If he ends up rolling into a power position and then kind of pulls a Tulsi Gabbard, well, that'll answer our question. I hope that's not what happens. I'd like to believe that we live in a world where at least it's possible that people can do the right thing and benefit from it. But now in the overlap to that, as he points out, Ehud Barak, drop site news just adds to this. You've already seen this, but just to include it for the segment, leaked emails from former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak reveal that Jeffrey Epstein helped open a secret back channel between Israel and Russia during the Syrian occupation, planning a meeting with President Vladimir Putin to discuss removing Assad and promoting a Russian-led peace plan, which I promise you would have still ended up in the same way. There was just another manufacturing endpoint of I argue, what Israel wanted from the outcome. Either way, the point was this is Israel pulling the strings in the background, right? Using through their government, basically, the Israeli government through Epstein, using this network to basically attempt to create an outcome of removing Assad from power in Syria. I mean, this is one small insight. And it says between 2013 and 2016, Epstein advised Barack on messaging the Kremlin, coordinated with Israeli intelligence contacts, and used his elite network to shape U.S. and Russian policy debates over Syria and Iran. Their collaboration revealed a trove of Barack's emails hacked by Handala, also advanced Barack's global business ventures and Israeli security goals. This is what's happening right now in the world. This is what he was kind of just pointing to in that clip. The real situation. Now, even people like Jackson Hinkle comes out, says breaking FBI blocks Tulsi Gabbard office from investigating a foreign power with involvement in Charlie Kirk's assassination. This has been going around, and I think it's pretty obvious. We've seen the effort. Patel, in fact, even going back to this, Kash Patel questions grow as it revealed he gutted the Utah FBI leadership before the Kirk assassination. I find it interesting, though, how much this has kind of spun out a lot of this. Here's the Help Ranger. Kash Patel is running the cover. It's obvious now. I'm not a huge fan. I think a lot of people are way too partisan and absolutely subjective when it comes to things they cover. But overall, I think it's interesting that this is what's being covered right now. That, arguably the right in many ways is highlighting that Kash Patel is covering up for Israel. It just really highlights the broken nature of the Zionist influence over the left-right paradigm. And to accentuate further that point through Kash Patel and this, what I argue is a very obvious long-term agenda to create the very Muslim infiltration idea that the right is aggressively pushing right now. And guess what, guys? This literally has to do with Dearborn, Michigan. So if they had to fake an event like this, which is what I believe happened, or engineer it, doesn't that speak to the reality of that they're trying to make that there's not, if there was rampant terrorist Islamists running around carrying out terror attacks in Dearborn, Michigan, or at least breaking the law, you would need to do something like this. But that doesn't mean there's not a problem. There's a reality of this conversation. It's not one side or the other. There is a reality of weaponized migration. And I can prove to you that Israel is engineering at least some of that for their agendas within this country. And what are they doing? Creating the ideas just like this, using their fake channels and their fake propaganda to create the idea that there's Islamist militant terrorists all over the world, even though we know that they've all been funding them all over the world their entire existence. On top of that most of these you can prove over the past have been operatives working for Israel in regard to what they're putting forward, like Whitney's coverage of the ISIS guy being caught, or rather a Mossad agent being caught as the head of ISIS at a point, I think 2017, if I remember correctly. I can probably grab it, actually. Let's see. There we go. This will probably pop up. There's a lot of coverage on it, but I believe Whitney's article, yeah, there it is. Israeli website claims it was an Israeli website, claims ISIS commander revealed as Mossad agent. It's not new. Now, back to the point, though, that's not to say that we shouldn't be concerned about people who are extremists breaking the law, whether they're Islamic, whether they're Jewish, whether they're Christian, it doesn't matter. Extremism is a problem, whatever they believe, whatever religion, whatever ethnicity. It's funny how we box it out and be like, nope, just when that kind of person does the bad thing, it's just stupid. This is important to understand. It's been going on a long time. But back in Dearborn, for example, let's just say that there's been an engineered flood of Muslim people in the country, or in Michigan. So what's the issue there at the end of the day is that there's an argument that these people are invading and manipulating the country. Now, if they're breaking the laws, I've said every time, then make the case. I mean, I think that's what's really important. I don't think I'm going to get into it today. Yeah, we'll come back to it, but I'm going to get into this in a minute. This really weird argument we keep getting from people. And I mean, I should have actually just included that. Let me see if I did. We'll come back to this conversation for sure. No, I didn't today. But the point was that there's a post, and this has been a common sentiment of saying, look at what's happening. Look at all these Muslims in the country, and we can't do anything because they're here legally. Legitimately, in quotes, legal. Well, they are. The point is that it's just like I'm saying from the right that was happening with Elizabeth Newman. They're arguing that the right MAGA red hat terrorists were doing things, building like January right beneath the surface, and we don't know how to stop it. Now you got the right doing it about the left. Well, they're building. We just don't know how to stop it. So what they're coming to is we have to remove the right to stop us. We have to be able to remove people because they're Muslim. But it's not even hiding the point. And this is all over the right now. But the argument always comes back to, because I think they're hiding behind this idea that they're all evil, terrorist, Muslim radicals. Well, maybe some. And then even then, like, think about how weird it is that we have the people that are trying to convince us that you're allowed to think and say what you want, and then look at them, they have radical ideas. Are they breaking the law? Look, I'm not saying there's not a concern to people who are, hiding. Like, that's the same point they make about Laura Loomer or anybody else. Do I think Laura Loomer is working on behalf of a foreign country, or at the very least acting in the interest of a foreign country at the expense of American interest? I do. Can I explicitly prove that? No. The point is, would I still defend her right? And the point was, is she hiding behind her rights of free speech, right? Acting with it and using, yes, probably. Would I still defend her right to free speech? Yes, I would. Even if she's deliberately using the free speech mechanism to manipulate Americans for the interest of foreign power, she's not breaking the law in that context, or rather the constitutional reality. So you have to stand with the principle. The only thing that helps to broaden the scope is the government, period. Especially when you stand back and realize that the problem you're pointing to is actually manufactured by them to begin with. Back to the story. Thwarted Michigan Halloween terror plot had connection to ISIS. Not a joke. Fox News learns October 31st. Says this morning, the FBI thwarted a potential terrorist attack and arrested multiple subjects in Michigan who were allegedly plotting a violent attack over Halloween weekend. Kash posted on his second post. Deleted the first one. I'll show you in a second. More details to come, Patel wrote. Thanks to the men and women of the FBI and law enforcement everywhere standing guard 24/7 and crushing our mission to defend the homeland. Crushing your mission. These are just, these people are so juvenile. It's just, I'm not saying you speak however you want, but it's like somebody trying to play to a crowd that they are not a part of, and failing. Like Elon Musk with MAGA, it felt forced, it felt clumsy, it felt like the guy who's not it felt embarrassing. And so does this. They're out there crushing our mission to defend freedom, to America. Yeah, that's what it feels like. That kind of stupid, over jingoistic patriot. It's not real, in my opinion. Anyway, he says, this is what law enforcement really looks like, said Dan Bongino as they high-five each other about this thing. Proactive, relentless, and focused on saving lives. Well, is any of that what happened? Doesn't appear to be. It feels like the people on chat rooms, we'll get to in a second. Bongino also posted on Twitter, writing, protecting the homeland is the top priority. We will not rest. Where's the Epstein files? News of the thwarted plot comes 10 months after the one we've talked about before. The clearly manipulated story of the guy driving a truck with an ISIS flag in the back. That's what they're pointing back to. Like we've seen, and weirdly, isn't it funny how that story and then the guy with the Mormon church, we just don't talk about those ones anymore because it's connected to the right. We don't want to talk about that. Hypocritical. I care about anybody breaking the law. But it's funny how everyone, and weirdly, even at that time, you don't get the left who want to go, why are they talking about that? Because you have a government problem. And you've got the people, like the screaming people on the right, that are supporting the government agenda, which is all of it, even the left. Because right now, that's what they want. And that's why you end up seeing these continual agendas. Now, here's the real point in all of this. Well, first, here's Wall Street Apes that came out after the FBI said things and said, guess what? Breaking news, what the FBI said. We're the rebels fighting the deep state, right? FBI raided multiple homes in Dearborn, Michigan, who were plotting coordinated violent attacks, said the FBI. He forgot to write that because he doesn't know that for sure. And it turns out that doesn't seem to be what actually happened. It's been confirmed, he says. The suspects were Muslim, tied to ISIS extremism. Is that what happened? They had AK-47s and weapons and firearm training in the middle. This is the kind of reporting you're getting. Breathless, outrageous reporting, which, by the way, is not what actually happened. The suspects were coordinating a violent attack involving firearms. So what happens is even politicians today in the MAGA side, and the same thing in reverse on the other side, will take these kind of posts and then, I actually think in this weird feedback loop, we have people in positions of power who are meant to propagandize you, who are being inadvertently propagandized by the independent false situation that they've created, like the mainstream alternative media. My point is that you can see examples like Noam, who cite, or McLaughlin, or Bondi, who cite things that were posted online that weren't even real from people like this that I think are deliberately manipulating, or at the very least, team sport playing. Okay, all this clip is just showing FBI walking up to a house. So my point is you have FBI saying something and this guy goes, breaking, we knew it, absolute. Muslims and terrorists and ISIS and guns and everything they said without any due diligence. That's embarrassing, guys. And this is the kind of major million follower, 1.1 million kind of thing you're getting today. Now, just a lawyer at the very least, a Michigan lawyer, says a Halloween terror plot that FBI Director Kash Patel described never existed. Yeah, and of course the lawyer could lie, right? That's not that far-fetched. So that's right. Just this is just the general. They're mostly redundant with the articles we're going to get to next. The point is, the lawyer says it didn't even happen because it didn't. Because nothing happened. It was impossible. So Max Blumenthal points out. Well, first, this is what Kash Patel posts, and this was the follow-up one. The FBI stopped a potential terrorist attack. Don't you love how he does these and posts the Fox News article? I mean, it's just it's like, this is a PR marketing. This is why I wonder whether these people are actually even in control, whether Dan or Kash or Hegseth, as James Lee pointed out. They seem to be like the staged front of it. The Zelensky 1+1 TV show cabinet that aren't really the ones running the show. That's what it feels like. That's not an approvable point. But everything they do just seems clumsy and like they're aiming it at the propaganda Twitter game and nothing else. But it says, thanks to swift action and coordination with our partners, a violent plot tied to international terrorism was disrupted. Okay. Max points out that in the article and based on their statements that it seems the FBI was involved and stopped before it happened. Looks like yet another case where the FBI informant manufactured a terror case so the Bureau could frighten the public while claiming credit for protecting it. In fact, the FBI says it doesn't even know what the plot was, when the plot would be, what the target would be. It's not a joke. But you see how different that is from what Wall Street Apes was saying? AK-47s, online chats, and a Pumpkin Day reference lead FBI to avert a potential ISIS-inspired terror attack. So this was on the 31st. And it says, just what he wrote there, what he was highlighting for you. An FBI undercover person was introduced into the chat room in the early stages of the discussion. So here's the first thing to think about. So you're telling me these are ISIS terrorist-linked people plotting a terror attack in the country. And you hop in as a rando and just go, hey, guys, let's kill things today. Yeah, pumpkins. And they're like, yeah, come on in, bud. Join the conversation for our terrorist attack. Does that sound like that makes sense to anybody? Like, even if you were, because what they said is they came in to early stages, they weren't there planning beforehand. So they're in the middle of the staging plan, they claim, which, as you'll see, turn out to be random conversations online for people that legally own guns and have them registered. That's not a joke. And so he comes in early stages. What do you think that looks like? In the mindset of planning a terror attack on a chat platform that no doubt is easily found out by the FBI and anybody else, by the way. Like, it's just so ridiculous. And so they're going to come in and say, hey, let me join your terror attack. I like what you're doing here. I mean, it's no world in which that makes sense with the level they're trying to project. An ISIS-linked international terror organization. It's pathetic, guys. It's pathetic, but it perfectly lines up with what I expect from people who don't know what they're doing. The participants discussed whether to carry out an ISIS-inspired plot in the U.S. And it says, quote, though what the plot was, when the plot would be, what the target would be, was unclear, as they discussed various options in terms of timing. Wow. This is John Miller. So next article has a little more detail. This goes on November. This was yesterday. Here's what we know and don't know about the alleged terror plot thwarted by FBI in Michigan. Now, as far as I can tell, as of right now, they haven't even been charged. So you realize that was the 31st. Okay. So the reality of that is that it would definitely have happened by now if they had already done this. This feels, I'm not going to jump the gun because who knows what, maybe it's because they're bad at this. It'll take a week. Sort of like the Obama and the rest will point out again in a second. If this doesn't happen, that means something, right? We need to look back and go, they didn't even charge this guy. But if they throw out, flimsy charges that seem designed to fail, it's the same point, but just a little bit more cover. But here's what it says. Mackled urged people to wait for verifiable facts. And this Mackled was the, where was his name here? Their attorney, Mackled. Amir Mackled. It says Mackled urged people to wait for verifiable facts before jumping to conclusions, which we all should do. Even with the Tyler Robinson thing, like, isn't it embarrassing that he is still yet to actually be found guilty and all of them just absolute, even Vance and Trump, we know it. That's embarrassing, guys. And it just shows you they're just trying to muscle their narrative in. Even if it's true, that's what they want. They want to overtake. That's what the government's always done, left and right. But it says his client, 20-year-old U.S. citizen, who has not been publicly identified, is cooperating with authorities and has not been formally charged. He's a U.S. citizen. Doesn't that matter? Apparently not. They see how it's not mentioned in all these other because they want it to be a radical Islamist, ISIS linked. They're trying to project foreign terrorist invasion. This is what Israel wants for you. This is what Israel wants you to think is happening. Now, whether that's what this is irrelevant to the point I'm making. I believe that is what this is. My point is, whether this is organic or not, it's exactly what Israel wants for your view to be. It's exactly what they need to accomplish their goals, and exactly what seems to be failing right now with the Mark Levin, Laura Loomer spin out. Like, they're all very much kind of losing the plot. And on top of that, going after anybody they can, even remotely connected to some speech and Tucker Carlson. Like, I mean, I'm not even getting into it because I don't trust that whole dynamic, any of them, like High Impact Flisk was saying. But nonetheless, I think even if they are honest, it just shows you this whole thing is spinning out, and they're just desperately trying to force in the Israel first mentality under a guise of America first. It says, quote, "We are confident that," and just reiterate in case you missed that, they haven't identified him and have yet to even charge him with anything. We are confident that once the facts are reviewed objectively, he says, it will be clear there was never any planned mass casualty event or coordinated terror plot of any kind. Now, again, I would argue the lawyer would probably say that regardless, but this is where the facts appear to line up. It says, quote, "The reality here involves a small group with a lawful interest in recreational firearms, not a terrorist cell or organized attack." Now, doesn't that just take the cake that you have the Republican team who is now trying to go after an American because he has a legal firearm and talks about it online, and everything else seems to be filling in the blanks and trying to force it into reality? Why? Because because it appears to be, I'm not going to jump the gun, they're telling you he appears to be Muslim and is in Michigan. It feels like an effort to set this story up, and they did very clumsy work. Now, my argument, as always, is I think the reality of this is trying to create organic events through manipulation, if that makes sense. But because the reality of the past is where you could send in a Mossad agent, for example, and carry an attack out. But there's so many there's surveillance and what they know that we online will go through this with a fine-tooth comb, and we seem to catch them every time. So the agenda these days seems to be sort of a scapegoat. Take someone that doesn't even know they're being used and let them be the fall guy and use the narrative, but they seem to be failing at that. The reality here involves a small group. It says all firearms were legally obtained and registered. Yeah, because it makes sense that terrorist groups would use legally registered firearms, right? Right, Kash Patel? The attorney said he is concerned about rhetoric that's harmful to the large Arab and Muslim population in the state of Michigan, specifically in Dearborn. Now, that very much does matter. Sort of like anybody going, all the Jews here are bad people. Everyone would lose their minds. Same idea. The point, in my mind, is that you're tainting the conversation. If you charge him, which is what they do every time. This is what even with Noam and Bondi around Garcia, there was a whole big thing about this where they're going to be, I think it hasn't come to pass yet, but there might be another suit or legal process about how many times they've come out and tainted the conversation by screaming terrorist, MS-13 gang member, rapist, which none of that is true. In the court has come to pass. But them saying it might eventually taint the jury if that comes to pass. Same point here. By screaming these things and having your propagandists online flood the narrative with absolute nonsense, people might then come to, being tapped as a jury member thinking that is the reality and the fake news is hiding it, which is a real possibility, but that does not appear to be what's happening here. It says this all relates to an investigation that started months ago into people who were communicating online with each other here in the United States, but also talking to people overseas. That's how the internet works, guys. Possibly connected to ISIS. Don't you love that? Possibly connected. So based on this, they could probably just bomb their house right now, and that would be okay based on Trump's broken mindset of how this works. But realize what they're saying there. Oh, possibly overseas? Like, I remember one of the arguments that PayPal tried to use first before they tried to use before they successfully used medical misinformation to steal $6,000 and shut down my account, which now turns out to very much be an ADL effort, is that they tried to make the case that so people donate. I don't control who donates or where it comes from. I just have a publicly listed PayPal donation. Same with everything else today. I got a donation from somebody in Iran. They froze my account for like a week and they were like, we need to what does that have to do with me? I didn't choose that. They donated. It doesn't matter. It's the same kind of idea. trying to make this argument that they were just communicating with someone overseas. They're in a chat room, you moron. Like this very well could be that they're coordinating, or it could just be that somebody from overseas is in that chat room that also enjoys talk about guns or whatever it was, because we don't have all the information they were fully talking about. And it says the participants discussed whether to carry out, this is what they're claiming, does not appear to be the reality, but we will find out if and when this comes out in full. They were discussing whether to carry out an ISIS-inspired plot in the U.S. Quote, though what that plot was, we read earlier, what the plot will be and what the target would be was unclear as they discussed various options in terms of timing. So how in the world can you argue, one, that it's an attack, let alone an ISIS-inspired attack, if you don't know what the plot was, where it would be, when it would happen? In what way does that even connect to ISIS or anything for that matter? It says it's not clear what the two people arrested were charged with and whether the charges have even been filed. My God, this is where we are right now. How embarrassing as an American that we have to go through stuff like this. Now here's Grok simply said, what did they use to make the claim of ISIS connection? Now I can tell you by my own research before we look into Grok that there's nothing. There, at least what we can prove and the evidence at hand, it's completely subjective as usual based on circumstantial things. By saying possibly, and they're even saying possibly, as of right now, after arresting them. But the point is, as you might have expected, online communication chat rooms. And all they're saying is the things they discussed might have been ISIS inspired. That's all that means. That's not, I remember what Wall Street Ape said. Verified ISIS connections. That's not what that is. That's not even what they're saying, but that's what spreads around the Nick Sorter, Benny Johnson group. And it says overseas contacts potentially linked to ISIS. Oh, yeah? The group was found to be communicating not only among themselves, but with somebody they claim was connected. Oh, okay. So somebody in the chat room they claim might have been connected to ISIS. That's the argument. Related activities under surveillance is the suspects engaged in firearms training at a shooting range. Oh, my God. And Wall Street Apes go, oh, my God, they had special arms training for ISIS. Are you serious? You mean Americans with a license who went to a shooting range? I do it all the time. It says practice high-speed reloads with the AK-47. Okay. I don't even know what that means in the context of what evidence they have. For all we know, they're just making that up. The reality is people who did legal things at a legal fire range. That's what that means. While referencing Pumpkin Day. Oh my God, they said pumpkin. Must be a terrorist attack. This is literally, this is what they did. It says interpreted by the FBI as a potential allusion to a Halloween attack. So this literally appears to be guys on a chat room talking about guns, legally owned guns, where they shot them, and then maybe other things we haven't found out yet, who they claim might have had somebody foreign in the chat who said Pumpkin Day. And somehow that means they're going to commit a terrorist attack. I think this is one of the clumsiest, most obvious efforts to just make it look like Kash is doing something. That's what I genuinely think. It says this activity heightened concerns about their readiness with internal groups. FBI Kash Patel publicly confirmed the arrest on Twitter, because that's what he does. Well, here's what's interesting to me. Here's the original. Oops, I've closed it. Here's the original post. Forgot I went down more. So I wanted the official link. I said, give me an official link with details, and all they could give you was the FBI page, which is just the general random FBI office Detroit. Great information. And then, of course, his post, which is no longer there, which I'll show you what it is, though. This one here. So here's what the post said that they deleted. We just thwarted a potential terrorist attack over Halloween weekend in Michigan. Multiple arrests were made after months of FBI surveillance on the group discussing an ISIS-inspired plot. That appears to not be true. In online chat rooms. Well, I guess you could argue they could always spread it to ISIS-inspired somehow, but it says they were training with firearms and had overseas contacts. That's why I think he deleted it, because that appears to be blatantly made up based on the idea that they might have been somebody foreign, which is where it actually amounted to. And it says public safety remains our top concern. Okay. Well, he deleted that and then posted this one. This morning, the FBI thwarted a potential terrorist attack and arrested multiple subjects in Michigan who were allegedly plotting a terrorist attack over Halloween weekend, with more details to come. That's where it ends. Thanks to the men and women. Okay. Why is that important? Well, because by saying they were training with firearms on overseas contacts, that's what led to Wall Street Apes screaming that without evidence. And on top of that, that's my opinion anyway. And on top of that, training with firearms, overseas contacts, that is a way to say Americans who aren't breaking the law, to make it sound like they're working with foreign elements, overseas contacts. This guy is desperate, and it's like he's working out of some spy novel and makes himself look like a child. At the end of the day, I think this is very obvious. And let's again go back to the point. Let's not forget that he's already very, very questioned by the idea of what happened with Charlie Kirk, what he did with this weird Dallas shooting where he seemed to have dumped bullets in the ground with a ballpoint pen written on it saying anti-ISIS, or anti-ICE, excuse me, which is the only thing that ever made that connect back to the idea that they were going after ICE. The reality, don't forget, was the people they arrested didn't even have guns or shoot. It was another random person who they say they weren't involved with, who shot, who's the one that did apparently hit a ICE agent, and then they blamed the people that were there protesting who didn't do anything violent. That's the story. Their effort was to claim that they were working with that person. Best I can tell, they didn't actually even flesh this out. But they go, terrorist, anti-ICE, lefty, lunatic terrorism. That's what it turned into. And they dumped this thing out in the midst of the investigation. It's embarrassing. My point is, this guy, I think it's obvious what's happening here. Now, let's not forget, before we wrap this up today, the FBI entrapment of Americans continues with latest arrest, 2023, of an 18-year-old with developmental issues. Let's not forget how often this happens. This is the last American vagabond, Derek Bros. This is constant. Where they use somebody who is mentally challenged to try to manipulate them into a terrorist attack. That's actually more common than you realize, or just other random people like they just tried to do there. Here's an example going further back, 2018. Parents catch FBI in a plot to force mentally ill son to be a right-wing terrorist. Now, people may go, oh, this is just your conspiracy platform, and just disregard them. Well, that's your stupidity. You can look into it and see that they're proven. See that they link back to mainstream platforms that talk about this. It's a very public story. The point is that we covered, actually, this was Matt Agarist from the Free Thought Project, but this is a very public story. The bottom line is the parents caught them trying to set this kid up who was just desperate for friends, and ultimately said he didn't want to do it at the end because the argument is he just was trying to say whatever he could to make them like him. And then he didn't do anything, and so they try to charge him anyway. That's exactly what's happening today, or the one we showed you before, or any number of stories we've covered. 2023, how and why the FBI manufactures terrorism. And other discussion at the time was trans activist wants to force attendance to drag story time. But here is that's where I got the image from, The Intercept, the sting, how the FBI created a terrorist. This goes back to 2015. Here's another article from them, 2015 as well. Why does the FBI have to manufacture its own plots if terrorism and ISIS are such grave threats? Exactly the point I'm making today. This is Glenn Greenwald at the time. Here's the one from the New York Times. Terrorist plots hatched by the FBI, 2012. It's nothing new, guys. If you just follow this platform, you already know that. But it's obvious to see what's going on. Back then, look into these stories and realize how completely inept the current administration is. And I mean just in regard to the FBI, but in general too. What they did back then was there was some tact to it, right? They got caught, and I argue plenty of times they didn't. But it was well crafted for the most part. Not a praise, because they're terrible things, but compared to what we're seeing now, it's pretty sad. But it's not new. This is just an overlap to a recent article. Among those who marched into the Capitol on January 6th, an FBI informant. It is simply what they do. Kash Patel is just the last person to step in there and allow it to crumble, I guess. I think for foreign power interest. But speaking of foreign power interest, here's this Zionist propagandist, Yakal Jacoby, who came out on the 1st and says, and this is all around after the Dearborn, Michigan terror attack that didn't seem to happen. He says this photo isn't from the plotted terrorist attack by Islamists. It's actually from the one they plotted a few months ago in Alabama. It's easy to get confused because of how frequently they try to murder Americans. So he's trying to play a game here by using a false picture, and good on, I think it's Max for calling him out, to claim this was he's trying to say that's actually incorrect. There's so many of these radical Muslim terror attacks, and they're everywhere. Well, that's actually not what that is. That is a picture which you could prove to yourself. These weapons belong to a white Christian man, funny enough, from Alabama, named Jeremy Shoemaker, who made death threats to local Muslims and Jews. E.L. Jacoby spreads multiple lies every day on behalf of Israel. He literally does. He's very, very, very prolific about it. The judge who dismissed his fake anti-Semitism case against UPenn blasted his lies. And that's why Jacoby deleted the post, because he got called out. Then he got ratioed. The point, though, and says here's the owner of the weapons cache, is that this is Jacoby. I'm glad we had on the way back machine, or the archive machine. who's just trying to lie to you. He's every single day out there pretending to be for American interest, absolutely trying to gaslight you in the interest of Israel. In this case, the same point I make, not publicly for Israel, but what Israel's agenda is. And we know he works for Israel's agenda, is to make you think Muslims are out to get you everywhere, which is just simply not the case. Now, last few points on this, and we'll end with some more lies that I want you to see. Interesting overlap to Kash Patel is this ridiculous plane fiasco, which will seem to potentially be his undoing, which is hilarious to me, seeing as how there's been so many massive crimes that this ends up being the thing. That's crazy. But this person, Kyle, I'm not familiar with, Sheparfin, looks like he says veteran dad, FBI agent, I'm not sure where he leans, but he says fired. Hopefully, no. The reason I'm saying that is only because, not that I even care, I believe this is a Republican-sided count who is calling for Kash to be fired. That's why I think that's relevant. And he says, hopefully no one gets fired from this post, but Kash blocked access to our taxpayer-funded FBI jet. So I paid extra to keep tracking it. He says, last night he flew to Mar-a-Lago, allegedly to be yelled at, and then after firing Stephen Palmer, flew directly to Nashville. Now, if you haven't caught up in the story, Kash Patel, who previously made a big stink about this, I'll play the video, used the jet to watch his girlfriend sing at some event, some wrestling event, I guess. While the government's shut down, a thing we pay for with our tax dollars. And people call it out, and he freaks out about it, fires somebody for calling it out, and then tries to shut down the reporting of it. I mean, this is a guy who thinks he's got power and is clearly being shown. I mean, they do have power. But the reality is they have to at least pretend like they operate within the realities of the Constitution. And some of these new guys just don't even understand that reality. And so it's blowing up in his face a little bit. Here's just the general saying FBI Director Kash Patel has asked to halt tracking of his government-owned jet after reportedly using it last week to fly out and watch his girlfriend perform at a wrestling event. The clown. And so here, and this guy even says, dude, looks like he likes flying on our dime. Look at how often this is happening. Constantly using this jet to fly all around your tax dollars while people can't feed themselves. These are people that are not fighting for American interests, guys. They're trying to ingratiate. They're trying to they're profiteering. They're trying to enrich themselves. Well, FBI fires top official amid Kash Patel's outrage over reports of agency jet use that was real. So he fired him because he didn't like to be called out. He's a child. It says Patel reportedly became furious after revelations he flew to visit his girlfriend as agency fires official who oversees the fleet. Top FBI official with 27 years in standing. And I mean, look, I think the whole FBI should go away. So I'm not arguing he should, I'm just going to make a point from within the dynamic of like the right that supports all of this. He's a 27-year veteran who has reportedly been fired by Kash Patel. Because Kash became enraged by press stories revealing that he used a government jet to travel to see his girlfriend sing. Stephen Palmer, which, by the way, why is she even doing that? Is she somehow a famous singer? Not that I'm aware of. Maybe I'm wrong. But it says Stephen Palmer, who had worked at the Bureau. I actually just jumped into my head. How much you want to bet that he probably made that happen for her? Drunk on his own perceived power. Wouldn't surprise me. Stephen Palmer, who had worked at the Bureau since 1998, was fired as head of the FBI's Critical Incident Response Group, which is responsible for handling major security threats, as well as overseeing the agency's fleet of jets. It says he was the third head of the unit to be dismissed since Patel became the second Trump administration FBI director. Guys, that's not a good sign. I mean, you could pretend it's old holdover Democrats. These are people, in my opinion, that are not willing to just do whatever they're told. And I'm not even saying they care about doing what's right or wrong. It's about the reality that they don't want to be the one caught at the end of the day. So people go, no, I'm not going to do it, and people like Kash and Bondi and Noam were like, I'll do it, in my opinion. Now it says Bloomberg Law, which broke the story, said that 3 unnamed sources had expressed astonishment at the sacking given that Patel's flight schedules were fully public and trackable on websites. A day after her performance, Patel himself had reposted photos showing him together with his girlfriend and the country singer Alexis Wilkins on his Twitter account. I mean, it's just like Elon Musk kind of spinning out about the same exact thing of his other jet, which was publicly listed, and calling it doxing and censoring a bunch of people. That was one of the earliest examples of his hypocrisy. Now it says on Sunday, Patel posted a lengthy statement on his Twitter account in which he said he refused to be distracted by baseless rumors. Here's what it says. He goes, I'm proud of the work of the FBI. I'm proud of the work of this FBI. We're taking violent criminals off the streets in record numbers, not as far as I can tell. Crushing the fentanyl crisis, not as far as I can tell. Dismantling cartels, not as far as I can tell. Saving, same point all the way along. hunting down terrorists like the fake ones you pretend. That's he's posting this on the 2nd. That's why he's saying that. Let me be clear. I love when they do that. It's meant to be gravitas. Let me be clear. We will not be distracted by baseless rumors or the noise. No, it's a very real story everyone can prove. See, this is why he's bad at this. Or no, what he sees, I think, is Trump and the rest of them doing that, like this bombastic denial, and pretty much just as clumsy, by the way, but it works because they're more powerful, but it shouldn't. I mean, that's why I am outraged about how many lies are that clear. The point is that he does it like this, and it's just, you can't just be like, that's not true. We can literally, it's like saying there's no detaining U.S. citizens. Guys, we all see it. So this is how either desperate they are or how bad they are at this job. But he goes, and he says, from internet anarchists and the fake news, just throw out the buzzwords. I've always said, criticize me all you want. How much you want to bet he's never said this before? But going after the people doing great work, my personal life, or those around me is total disgrace. Well, just right to that point, here's the fact check that says people are largely attacking Kash Patel, not his girlfriend. It's just funny. The disgustingly baseless attacks on Alexis. That's not even, I don't think that's happening really anywhere. But it says, a true patriot and a woman I'm proud to call my life. Well, there's many people arguing she works for a foreign power. You can decide for yourself. It says she is rock solid conservative and like that is, it's just so funny. And a country music sensation. Is she really? Tell me in the chat if that's the case. I've never heard of it before. It says, I'm so blessed she's in my life. Attacking her is just wrong. Again, that's not what people are doing as far as I can tell. It's cowardly. I think he's trying to deflect in, again, a clumsy way from the fact that everyone's pointing at what he's doing. And he knows that. Don't make fun of my girlfriend. No one's doing that. And this FBI will stay laser focused on our mission. As many pointed out, like this guy's literally defending his girlfriend on this platform as the head of the FBI. This is just sad. Well, as Matt, I'll make sure I didn't miss something. I don't think so. Oh, this was just Max Blumenthal saying, this week in the life of the FBI director, Kash Patel. He got caught taking an agency jet to see his auto-tuned country singer girlfriend sing the national anthem, maybe some of them are, at the pro wrestling event, fired the top FBI official in charge of agency jets, blocked public tracking of the agency jet he took, disrupted a phony terror plot in Michigan, blocked a DNA probe into Charlie Kirk's killing, issued a tweet blasting uninformed internet anarchists for being mean to his girlfriend. It's a sad display. Oh, that was right there, I guess. And then here, you might have seen this clip floating around. Think about how bad this is. It's sort of like him going, release the Epstein files, and then acting like they're not real. Here he is about jets back in 2023.
I'm not saying take all their funding. I'm not the defund everything guy. I'm just saying Chris Wray doesn't need a government-funded G5 jet to go to vacation.
Oops.
Maybe we ground that plane. $15,000 every time it takes off.
Oops. Yeah, and you see the list I showed you a second ago? Like, and that was like from the 30th. I mean, that was from, I think, the last 5 days. There was like 11, 12 different flights right there. Add it up.
Just a thought.
Minimum.
To go to vacation. Maybe we ground that plane. $15,000 every time it takes off.
See?
Just a thought.
Minimum. These guys. It's just sad how clearly they are hypocrites while they won't call these things out now, right? Think about that. If you were, I think it was Glenn Beck. You should be going, oh my, these people aren't real, but they're all still supporting them. Even if they, like an Alex, will make a point. Look at Randy Fine calling out free speech. He's calling after people for and then going on to support all of them anyway. Still supporting Israel, still supporting Trump, probably still even supporting Randy Fine when it counts. That's what they do, guys. They love to give you lip service where it matters because you just can't pretend him saying you're not, or Nikki Haley coming out and saying, you can't, free speech is everything, but you can't say mean things to Jews. That's what they're doing, even though what we're talking about is mean things to Israel's government. But this is what it looks like to be a hypocrite. And then think about how crazy it is to make the rounds of going after all their, look at we just ground their jet. They're spending taxpayer money. And then to go to this extent, not just like one time where it counts, but to just use it because you feel like this is them doing the same thing they were because they feel entitled. The left did it, so we can do it. These are children, guys, or just as corrupt. Probably both. Wall Street Apes, again, director of the FBI, confirms that Nancy Pelosi is going to jail. Well, again, that was last month, a month ago. Nothing has been aimed at Pelosi. So he just blustered. And Apes and the rest come out and go, it's happening. Pelosi's coming down. Or same thing. You've seen this clip more than once. I figure we play it again. This goes back to August 23rd. August 23rd. Big news coming.
All right. I have been talking to a lot of high-level DOJ sources. I'll leave it at that. I had a long conversation with one today. And I was actually authorized to tell you.
Ooh, big stuff.
Basically everything they told me, except a few things. But you know what? With the notes I wrote, I'm going to think about this. And
yeah, maybe I'll hold off a minute and not say the things I don't have.
Before I start putting it out.
Yeah.
Because this is big information. And folks know about me and InfoWars. I don't tell you I got something big unless I got something very, very big.
And then nothing happens. How funny is that? Big. That was August 23rd. Okay. Huge DOJ actions. Now, is he talking about Letitia James? He's talking about Comey? Bolton? Now, you realize you could call those huge, but in the context of what's going on, those are peanuts. And the reality is they're clearly flimsy cases that are designed to fail. You can push back all you want. Watch as this comes to pass. So, and that's not even who he's talking about. Again, down below, here he is in 2024 saying, if we can just keep Trump alive, we'll get Schwab and Gates and Fauci and Hillary going to jail. Okay, I would love to see all of that, Alex. What's going on now? So I followed up on the 29th and I said, any updates, Alex? I followed up a week after that or a month after that. And I said that would put that meme out. Well, we're waiting. We just at some point have to call these things out, don't we? That's what I say in the beginning. This is where I go. Is that important? Should I go back? I think there are people, I know there are people in my life who think that, who fall for it. So it's like, it's like my job in this field has never been to, like I've said before, sort of high five with all of us that we see it, and sometimes it's important just to, continue to keep, we're all on the same track. We see the facts. My point has always been to try to get that one last person, right? The people that need to see this, not necessarily stand in the big room and make sure everyone sees that I'm saying the thing, even to get more support, which I need to keep doing this, but to make the hard choice, right? And to cover the thing, not like that's what this is, but in general sense, to talk about the things that may not be the most popular, but make the most effect on the people who are still lost. That's what I care about. And so in this case, I know people, good people who genuinely believe people like this, and to recognize that they've either been wrong repeatedly or lied over and over, him or any of the rest, I find to be valid and important. But, I'm still listening to you guys in that regard more than ever. Let me know what you think. Because it does take away from other things, right? But same thing here. This one of these guys I've recently seen who, by the way, you know why? Because as his new algorithm is just all I get these days. In fact, I should even show you this. Let's look real quick. Completely organic. Let's see what this is. Let's just look at what my notifications say. Or not notifications, my timeline. Okay. So my For You timeline. Okay. James Woods. First one. Don't follow him. Okay. Interesting. What's the next one? Let's see. Brendan Dilley. Don't follow him. Okay. I don't even look at these guys. I these days I try to actively avoid these people because they're ridiculous. David Camp, I do follow. That's one that popped up. Usually it's way further down. Nick Sorter, I don't follow. Like, I don't try to find these people get jammed in front of me. That's what this broken algorithm is. Here's a little bit better. Here's Melnick, who I do follow. Ryan Grimm, I do. Isabella Maria. Like, see, here's the thing. Why would any of these be in a field where I don't want to look at these people? You get the point, guys. It's not new. There's new algorithm. It's the same stupid stuff. This guy's one of those people that gets jammed. You know why? Because he's going, it's all coming down. Biden-Harris terrorists under administration awarded over 9 million illegal alien social security numbers. Probably. Let me know when they go to jail, bud. Let me know when they end up in jail for that very, very massive, massive crime. I'm not even downplaying. That's a huge deal. Do you think they're going to go to jail? Was Kristi Noem going to do anything about that? Guys, you already know the answer. We've seen enough time pass already for we need to go, okay, this is not actually happening. So all of you honest conservatives, that I'm the mind as most of you, call it out. Here's one that really frustrated me, by the way. RFK Jr. exposes the Wuhan cover-up. How Fauci, the Pentagon, and the CIA-funded labs engineered a global catastrophe. I was going, great, good, let's get this moving. In his explosive new book. Look at the comments. That's exactly what I was thinking. Oh, so here's Megyn Kelly. Here's my new book about all the crimes that Fauci and you're in the government right now. You mean Fauci, who's right there? Go arrest him. You're literally laying out a sourced case for why they did one of the largest crimes in human history. And we're just going to let that fly? We're going to make the media rounds and talk about how much your book is selling, but we're not going to go after the people who go. I mean, come on, guys. It kills me. I'm not even saying that maybe RFK Jr. is blackmail. Maybe he's on your side. I don't even know. The bottom line is, if we don't see things happen, then we must acknowledge that something is amiss. Whether they're lying to you or whether they're being controlled, just acknowledge it's not happening. This is really, this of all things, really frustrated me because it's such an important topic that everyone talks about. And you've released a book. Where's Fauci? Where's Gates? Where's Schwab? Where's all the rest of them? Oh, that's right, because Donald Trump was completely immersed with that. I mean, literally is that Operation Warp Speed. It'll never happen because any of it will lead back to him. Now, and the same story in reverse. Biden and anybody else or any other parts of the things they were involved with, they're all involved is the crux of the point, not just left versus right or Trump versus Biden. Okay? Here's Gunther Eagleman, million follower account. Who's ready to see Adam Schiff go to jail for the Russian hoax, mortgage fraud? He's tagged in this post. Let him hear you. Really? Still we're back on that now? Okay, this is the whole thing. January, I'm good. Arrest him. I said, let me know when he goes to jail, which he deserves. Until then, you keep farming that engagement, man. And of course, profiting off the pushing of hopium as your willful blindness destroys the country. #winning. I think this is important to point out. Like, it maybe one day, right? But the fact that it's been like, you look at their accounts every day, more than once a day for what? The last year of just nonstop. They're going to jail forever. We got it. Let me hear you. Give me what is the new thing? Give me a dot below if you agree. It's just crazy. I want to see him go to jail too. Now, the other part of it is just people who are profiting off of literally manufacturing fake, not like me, like they've already floated, for example, that Pelosi might be charged, right? They floated that. So somebody going, this is a thing, is at the very least, they're pointing at a hypothetical that might happen. In this case, this hasn't even been floated. You've got people like this who are farming influence from people that want to believe Trump's doing all this, and they just make stuff up. Stand Up for Trump. It's a smaller one, a 16,000 account. Let's see if it's gone up since then. I bet you it has. Look at that. See my point? See, this is probably brand new. Let me see. Or maybe, look, September 2025. Okay. This random account called Stand Up for Trump. All they do is it's a feedback loop. Whatever they want you to, Trump's doing this and he's doing that. 90% of it's probably false, like this. My point was, this account, look at this. It's already got, I bet you it's way more than that now too. 248,000 when I started. Now it's at 337,000. This guy has 16,000 followers when he starts. Now he's got 17.5. That's an hour ago, 2 hours ago. Think about how ridiculous that is. 17,000 and he gets 337,000 views. We have 77,000. We maybe get 2,000 on a post, if that. Here's the main point. He says, AG Pam Bondi is reportedly posed to charge Alejandro Mayorkas with treason for deliberately allowing 20 million illegals. Same point as always. Good, arrest him. He's a criminal. Problem is, nope. Here's Grok. The claim that the Attorney General Pam Bondi is poised to charge him is a fake news story. It's not true. It's a persistent, unsubstantiated rumor that has been circulating since May. And guess who likes to do that more than anybody? People like Mila Loves Joy, this girl who screams everything they hear about Trump without checking anything. Stand Up for Trump. Sebastian Gorka, right? Commentary Tom Horman. Gorka's got, that's the wrong one. I'm sorry. To correct the record, that's a small account using his name. The point, though, is there are larger accounts like Mila Loves Mila Joy, who's got 427,000 followers, who are perpetuating completely baseless claims because they want to believe Trump's doing this. Now, that has to prove to you that it's not happening at this point. I shouldn't say prove to you, but very much suggest that it's just simply not happening if they have to make it up. Now, on lies, to finish it up, guys, Tim Burchett, congressman representing Tennessee. Man, isn't it funny? Like, I'm just so government. It's just, people, it's not like I just don't. I used to try to get involved with the government, like understanding. Lately, I've been considering it locally, just like locally for like right around, which I do think is important. My point is just Tennessee. And I'm like, who's that? These people are so, I see them all as the same. And maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, he says, ma'am, Donald Trump has stopped first of all, Nancy simply says, why is he seemingly so determined to start a war? Trump. Because he is talking about Nigeria. And she goes, man, Donald Trump has stopped 8 wars in 6 months. Muslims in Nigeria have killed thousands of Christians. Men, women, and even children have been slaughtered. So what's the first point? Because he stopped 8 wars in 6 months, even though it's not true, it's okay if he starts another one? but it's a good to start another one because bad things happened. Aren't we the ones going, it's America first, we're not getting involved? I mean, and on top of that, the narrative of what's actually happening, we'll get into later, is not exactly what it appears to be as usual. The bottom line, as even Grok points out, no, President Trump has not definitively stopped 8 wars in his first 6 months. Bombshell! Anybody with a brain and 2 brain cells to rub together can recognize that's not true. And it says, this is a recurring claim from Trump and his administration, which has evolved from 6 wars in 6 months in August to 8 wars in 8 months. It's pathetic. The White House lists 8 specific conflicts as ended via U.S. broker deals. Hey, guess what? Did you know that the Israel-Hamas war is over? According to them, we ended it. It's over. Even though it's not. How about Israel and Iran? Even though there was never really a war per se, they say they ended it. Because what? Because this is where we're going. Now, most of them, to be clear, are things that he brokered in regard to some agreement that never, in some cases, weren't necessarily a war. In other cases, are by no means over. But it's just a narrative game. If you know that they're listing Israel as one of them, or Ukraine, by the way, then you know they're lying to you guys. It's just an effort to make you, but who knows if he knows that or not? Or he's just supporting Trump because he's a Republican. Who knows? We're in a very bad way in this country, guys. Here's Donald Trump. Grocery prices are up. Trump, no, you're wrong. No, he's wrong.
Just hit an all-time high. We're doing really well.
Can I ask you, Mr. President, on that point, though?
Yeah.
He's talking about the stock market, and she'll say that. But I'm glad she says this, even though I don't trust her or any media for that matter. The stock market does not represent it represents the 1%. The idea that most Americans even care about the stock market or even remotely have 401ks, it's not true. You could look it up for yourself. Most Americans these days are on the lower side of the income scale. There is basically no middle class. And then the people that are buffering either side of it are a small percentage. Then you got the 0.01% and everybody else. That's not my opinion. Look it up. We have been dramatically driven in this position. And he, either without knowing that, because he's only tapped into the people around him with money, or doesn't care and he's lying to you, wants you to believe that we're all succeeding. This is basic trickle-down economics. Guys, don't worry. Get the rich more money. It'll all come down to you. No, it doesn't. It never has.
When the stock market is doing well, that doesn't affect everybody. Not everybody's invested in the stock market.
It does.
But there have been grocery prices are up.
401ks. People have 401ks. Their 401ks are double what they were a year ago.
You see what a dumb response that is? Do a quick little search to find out how many Americans have 401ks. Is he the president of the 0.01% or is he the president of the country? Right? I mean, it's just that's I actually think like he with the MS-13 on the knuckle. I think that's what he thinks. That's all he cares about. Maybe he believes that does represent everybody, but it doesn't. That represents a fraction of this country.
For people that don't have 401ks or are not invested in the stock market, but they've seen their grocery prices go up. Inflation.
No, you're wrong. They went up under Biden. Right now, they're going down. Other than beef, which we're working on, which we can sell very quickly.
Nope. See, that's also a lie. On the next show, we're going to get into the beef point. Texas Slim talking about it, or Argentina, the money. They're hurting the beef industry. They're also hurting the farm industry right now. It's just not being talked about because all the screaming people in the paradigm aren't pointing to it. Well, and they couldn't stop talking about it under Biden, and it matters under both. That's my point about the agenda has pretty much remained the same. There's just a different narrative today with Trump. And no, guys, to the point of why we're showing it, grocery prices have not gone down. And again, you can look it up on 1,000 other ways. It's easy to find out that he's lying to you. But simply Grok says, yes, grocery prices are rising for most Americans in 2025. We do have the source material. You can look at for yourself that we checked first. First, food price outlook 25 to 2026. And it basically says all consumer prices have increased. Now, it says in this 0.03. It's not a ton, but it has gone up. And it has continued to from 2.9% from August. Right, so that is increasing. Our prices are up. Now, across the board, it's almost everything for most Americans. That is the reality. And it says this uptick affects the vast majority of households. Overall prices extending to all costs. Yes, prices are generally increasing for most Americans. Housing, 3.6%. Energy, 4.1% up. Services, 0.2% every month. I mean, you can get into all these, all plus. This is increasing. And it's not just this last moment. It's since he's been in administration. Now, again, maybe that changes tomorrow. Maybe it all goes up and he was right from the beginning. I hope so. The truth is, though, right now, he's just gaslighting you. Food inflation in the United States. The average price of food in the United States rose by 3.1% in the 12 months ending September. That's from the U.S. inflation calculator. Okay. Here's one from Generally Speaking from the same website. Current U.S. inflation rates from 2000 to 2025. The annual inflation rate for the United States was 3% for 12 months ending in September compared to 2.9 previously, according to U.S. labor data published in October 24, 2025. So it's going up. In a large sense, what this country is going through is benefits to the upper class, like usual, or rather the wealthy, and then everybody else suffering. And then they point to the same things every time. Biden did this. Look at the stock market. As if that means anything to people who are struggling, or most Americans for that matter. But the truth is about all of this today, guys, I mean, how much more can we take? How many more lies and just blatant misrepresentation, right? Faking events to literally entrap Americans because they have the wrong identity according to a foreign power. Spying on Americans using foreign tech. I mean, even just decouple the Israel part from the conversation. This is your government doing this to you. Every single day, it's right in front of you. Same things under Biden. Guys, if we can, I mean, look, here's what's crazy about this. I've been doing this a long time so far. Well, hopefully, we have another administration and this continues and our country doesn't just completely collapse. And I'll be doing the same things then. And I'd like to think that over a long enough period of time, people can simply just look back and go, he has been consistent with his principles. He has been saying that about Biden and then Trump and then, AOC or whoever else, hopefully not, comes into power. Right? Same thing I said about Obama. I mean, the reality is that the general stance for this platform has been the same. And yet people today, oh, you're anti-Trump, or oh, you just hate No, just continuing to call it out. And we'll call it out with the next selection that goes into place. And this is where I genuinely believe most Americans are getting to. That's why it feels so kind of unstable for them right now. We need to continue speaking out. I'm going to keep doing this as best I can, as often as I can. So do the same. Find the time, speak up, talk to people, share the word, share the source material. If you believe in this platform, what we're doing, show us what it means to you. Thank you for tuning in today. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.